I always thought that Dragon Age was probably the most generic, cookie-cutter title for a game series that anyone could have come up with. It's like naming your sci-fi epic about wars in space, Space Wars. And to be fair, Dragon Age was meant to encompass that very generic fantasy world setup. Magic, knights, elves and dwarves, demonic enemies, and the titular dragons. You can call that kind of setting played out and boring, but I don't play tabletop games because they're fantasy-based. I play them for the stories that a DM can come up with. The consequences that come with choosing one faction over another. The feelings that I develop for different characters in the adventure. Dragon Age Origins was meant to take a cliché setting and focus solely on good character writing with fun choices. You see traces of that in Inquisition, which at its core tries to continue that history of character development and storytelling, even if it was muddled relentlessly by poor game mechanics and non-existent side quest writing. And much like how monstrous the simply named Star Wars became, or how Toy Story became Pixar's #1 franchise, Dragon Age transformed into BioWare's lifeline after Inquisition became their best-selling game of all time. You would think that this would cause the studio to begin hyper-focusing on the next title in the franchise, learn about what performed well among their audience and what needed improvement. The irony here is that despite poorly imitating Skyrim's mechanics and open-world exploration, that pale replica outsold anything that the studio had ever done. And yet the initial plan for the next Dragon Age entry was for it to be a game about magical heists in the Tevinter Imperium. It was going to be small, less about exploring and more about player choice and connecting with well-written characters. If I'm going to be honest, that sounds like a fun idea, particularly if it was to be as story and consequence focused as it was pitched to be. But it was poised to be the exact opposite of its best-selling predecessor in a lot of regards, which did seem like an odd decision. Either way, BioWare had a secondary breadwinner when Inquisition came out, which did nearly as well as a franchise. Andromeda needed help, and much of the team was pushed over to aid its development. So the heist-focused fourth game was cancelled after the rest of the team was pulled to work on Anthem, the noose around BioWare's neck beginning to tighten slowly but surely. This was when the creative director left. Mike Laidlaw, the guy who was the story developer on Jade Empire, a writer for Mass Effect 1, the lead designer for Dragon Age Origins, and eventually the senior creative director for the entire Dragon Age series. But let's not worry about that. After the spectacular flop of Andromeda and the implosion of Anthem, Dragon Age was back on the menu, and this time EA was excited to have a team create something that was more online multiplayer focused. FIFA had long been their top seller, so why not apply the same principles to Dragon Age, right? There's a point where you read all of these processes, struggles, planning, and replanning and go, it's kind of a miracle this series succeeded the way that it did. Thankfully, Jedi Fallen Order made enough of a case for single-player games that EA decided to let BioWare do the thing it had historically been successful at. You gotta respect the sheer tenacity of EA executives though. I mean, these chads show up to work, point at their sports games and go, "Why fantasy game not have live service trading card pack?" Now, at this stage, it's been like 7 years of back and forth with the vision of the fourth Dragon Age game. And after 3 more years on top of that, the creative director is left, the replacement creative director is left, the executive producer is left, the replacement executive producer is left, the production director is left, and BioWare has laid off a slew of people from the team, including the writer who created Varric and the Qunari. It took a decade for the Veilguard to release. The development staff was completely different when it did, and all development beyond bug fixes came to a complete halt 3 months after the release when BioWare had no choice but to resort to working on one game at a time again. When the game trailers premiered, many were displeased with the direction that the series had seemingly taken. On one hand, Inquisition's best aspect was its character writing and development. On the other hand, the DLC beautifully set up the fourth game, causing it to appropriately be named Dreadwolf. It was a striking title that accentuated the doom that's permeating the universe by the end of the previous entry. It was a title of a game that knew exactly what it wanted to do and where it wanted to go. But it was replaced by the Veilguard at the last moment, a title that was admittedly less of a result of focus testing and supposedly more due to the emphasis on companion backstories. And I think that this change is very telling, because it feels like BioWare was scared of its own game and the direction that it wound up going. Dreadwolf promises something very specific. It would be like if the third game was named Dragon Age Corypheus. And that wouldn't have been a good fit for how the game turned out, and what it wound up focusing primarily on. So BioWare played it safe, trying to mirror Inquisition's title so that people didn't expect a game that's so heavily focused on the Dreadwolf. Reception was hard to quantify. If you know anything about this game's launch, you know that it partially got, political. We'll get to that, probably. But as far as numbers go, the Veilguard performed half as well as EA expected, prompting the CEO to claim that the people have spoken and what they want is multiplayer features. You know, like FIFA. People love FIFA. I've dreaded talking about this game since its initial release and the various topics that it seemed to get slammed over or defended for. I've got no idea if it's good or bad, if the gameplay is fun or not, if the writing is compelling or dog shit. So I'm here to figure that out. In this video, I'm going to play this game. I'm going to make fun of it when it fails. I'm going to praise it when it succeeds. I'm going to analyze story elements to see if they make sense within the confines of the game's universe. That's how this goes. I'm already disgruntled at BioWare and EA for their decision-making over the past decade, and I haven't even launched this damn game. The Veilguard launches with the most stressful music that I've ever heard in a main menu. The game begins by recapping the end of Inquisition with some pretty fun stylized graphics, which has always been a staple of these games. I went over all of this in my Inquisition video, but the refresher here is that Solus is the god known as the Dread Wolf. He received that moniker when he imprisoned the other elven gods, sealed away Fade magic into its own realm, and effectively destroyed the elvish society. After seeing history take a different course, he realized that elves get treated like shit by the other races which rule now. So he intends to reopen the Fade realm and have it merge with the physical realm again, which will once again destroy society and allow elves to take over again. After the recap, you get your character creation screen, which kinda makes me feel like I'm about to board a battle bus and drop into Tomato Town. The actual character creator is pretty decent, though no matter what I do, my guy feels, sterile? Like everything feels very clean, and while I have to give points for having my skull or ear shape push away my horns instead of clipping through them, it always feels like I'm creating a guy who's cosplaying as a Kunari, if that makes any sense. The body shape limits only add to that, as you can't really create someone who has a conventionally attractive curviness or a muscular bodybuilding type of frame. I guess when I play fantasy games, I want to play as someone with a fantasy body shape, but nothing in this character creator makes me feel like I'm building a massive hulking beast of a Kunari, something I was aiming for from the get-go. I always think of the era shock in Dragon Age 2 when I think of the model Kunari, large, powerful, grim features befitting of a leader. I just can't get away from this soft-skinned boy who looks like he borrowed money for a tattoo sleeve. And this kind of general sterilization extends to the faction that you can choose to begin as. All of them are these kind of, hey, we accept whoever the fuck wants to join us, we're all inclusive. Which is a safe choice to be sure, but ultimately very boring. Every single one of them involves a backstory where you went against the grain to save people or kill bad guys. Starting as an Antivan Crow has your town being taken over by quote-unquote brutal soldiers, causing you to spring into action against the wishes of your superiors to free captives. This caused your superiors to sideline you. This is a faction of assassins which owns a prison where victims are held for fun and torture. But you got a stern talking to. I guess you got lucky. The wardens involve you being ordered to hold the line against Darkspawn no matter what until reinforcements arrive, and you decide that if you do so, the nearby villagers will die, so you disobey orders, lead a charge against the Darkspawn, and seal the tunnel, which should be looked at pretty favorably despite the orders being ignored simply because you stopped the Darkspawn threat. However, this causes the quote-unquote wardens with connections to noble families to resent you for being so independent. That doesn't even sound like the Grey Wardens to me. You know, the faction that historically spit on nobility in the face of Darkspawn activity. But even the new factions are written like this. Veil Jumpers are a group founded by elves. They accept everyone. Their purpose is to explore elven ruins and bring back artifacts for study. In this backstory, you lose a precious map in order to save your crew from danger, resulting in your superiors resenting you. The Shadow Dragons work to fight slavery in the Tevinter Imperium. This time around, you throw caution to the wind in order to free slaves, which causes the bad guys to actively begin pursuing you. The Mornwatch deals specifically in magic, the magic of life and death. They take every class and race, even those who can't use magic. In this one, you defy the aristocratic patrons of the Mornwatch and save lives while preventing a civil war. And finally, the Lords of Fortune are a group who put all of their stock into raiding tombs and gaining riches. Now, this might be the first faction where I can be a greedy asshole who's only here to serve himself, right? Oh wait, the wiki notes that the Lords of Fortune are well known for stealing from rich collectors and returning artifacts to the ethnic groups that they belong to. So yeah, in this case, your background story is that you kill a corrupt noble, thus saving lives and preventing evil. These are all the same background story. You're a good guy who goods his way through life in an all-inclusive group while goodly helping other good guys and stopping slavery no matter what. Something tells me that the most morally gray choice that we're going to get in this game is whether to help an orphan by giving them candy which they'll love, or help them by giving them a nutritious sandwich which will sustain them longer. This game is very much hellbent on allowing its player base to be who they want to be no matter which walk of life that they hail from. It's a noble philosophy, and typically it's very welcome in the gaming space. If I launch into a first-person shooter that has little to no lore and it allows me to create a character from any race in any faction with any set of body parts, shapes, tattoos, etc., then that's a cool way to help me make a character that I want to play as. The problem is that this is the 4th Dragon Age game. There's established fragments of lore to each faction, to each race, to each part of the world. And this incessant sanitation right off the bat makes it very difficult to give this game fair opportunity to present its case. Believe it or not, the fact that a dwarf could only be a dwarven commoner or a dwarven noble in the first game was a plus. It really helped me to establish rules to the universe and made me more eager to try out a Dalish elf, a human noble, and so on later on. I guess we're way past the concept of starting one of these games in a completely different location with a completely different experience before converging into the main story, and I'm just holding on to the past because it feels like we've regressed and not improved. So in all honesty, these are all kind of surface level cool choices. The armors look great, the factions sound fun in their own ways, it's all a very light-hearted affair where you're the good guy, the chosen hero. And things have always been this way. Origins has you literally becoming the savior of the Blight. Dragon Age 2 puts you in the shoes of Hawk, who's just a good guy all around. Inquisition has you piloting the Herald of Andraste and banding together with a group of misfit survivors to stop the end of the world. So what's the problem? Well, you couldn't be an Antivan Crow, the elite group of assassins who employ children from a young age and kill them if they don't mesh well. The Wardens were an established group of loners who had a mystique to them, who were their own people with their own plans to combat evil, rarely dipping their toes into any political realm. The Qunari were this oppressive, fucked up faction who treated everyone harshly. Tal-Vashoth were pretty rare. Most didn't see themselves as individuals whatsoever. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't be able to have a character start as one of these factions, but why give them a Disney background story when you can make it a harsh and unforgiving experience that scars your guy, makes them interesting, gives them genuine trials to work through? I mean, yeah, sure, you can be a Crow or a Warden or a Tal-Vashoth, but it's going to cause some mental scarring to go through those trials, and that's going to make things more interesting. Look, I know we're only in the character creation menus, but the choices that you have here and their accompanying text speaks volumes about what's changed, about what's been overwritten and trampled. I'm sure that some people think I'm just overreacting, but I'm really not trying to. I'm not trying to go into this game with a negative attitude, I just don't like what I've seen from the get-go. Maybe this is just me misconstruing what's being presented, but this is the vibe that I got from this whole process. With no importing of old saves, you can try to recreate your Inquisitor from the previous game and then answer 3 questions about things that you did throughout your playthrough. Who you romanced, what happened to the Inquisition, and what you told Solas at the very end of the DLC. It's an intentional choice to go about things this way, as the creative director said that they didn't want to worry about contradicting past player choices. I think what happened with Mass Effect's cavalcade of choices and how the 3rd game's ending was received really fucked up BioWare's confidence levels when it came to involving player choice in their sequels. The game begins with Varric continuing to reprise his role as the narrator, stating that you tracked Solas down to the capital city of the Tevinter Imperium, Minrathous. This is a floating city in a country that has dedicated itself to the furthering and research of magic. You head to a bar, start a bar fight, and wind up winning because nobody brought any weapons. I'm curious about this one though, hang on. Let me make a mage real quick. An elven mage. Surely if I choose someone who has dedicated their lives to sorcery, then this scene will—
I'm not leaving until I know where she is. Be ready to talk by the time I get to you. Nev Gallus.
So yeah, I think it's safe to say that no matter how much they dress up the character creator with various factions, we're never getting the dedicated prologues that we got in Origins. Which is wild to me because all they really had to do was create 3 unique scenes with the same outcome. Mage threatens or fights with magic, rogue dodges and riposts, warrior does all this shit. Your objective seems to be to track down someone named Nev, presumably because they know the location of Solas. This has you running through linear streets, something native to Origins and 2, but foreign to Inquisition. So far the dialogue is serviceable. I imagine it's hard to write a game that recaps the major issue from the previous game while making things sound natural, but it is still odd being this guy that seems to know Varric well, but doesn't seem to know why Solas tearing down the Veil to the Fade is bad. You run through the city, Solas starts tearing down the Veil, and demons start running rampant around Minrathous. It's all a pretty standard action hero movie kind of start, though there's nothing particularly wrong with it yet. You meet up with Harding, who was the scout that introduced you to the various zones of Inquisition, telling you what was going awry and what to look out for. I never thought much of her, but I would say that she's a good choice as a companion for this game. So you get a bit of combat, which is flashy and fun to watch. Dodging, blocking, light and heavy attacks, it's all stuff you would expect after Inquisition, which began to stray even more from the tactile RPG kind of stuff. The interface feels a bit like a mobile game to me if I'm gonna be honest, and the actual mechanics of fighting winds up with you pausing to access your ability list before assigning one to a slot. As a warrior, you get to switch weapons from sword and shield to two-handers on the fly, which is kinda fun. Maybe every fucking class does that, I don't know, I just played warrior. Potions are found in green jars, which feels really strange for an RPG. It's a broad term that's only gotten broader with time to a point that RPG is nearly a meaningless tag on a game. But if I had to quantify what I think this game's combat looks like, I would call it an action-adventure game with very light RPG dialogue and choices. Of course, somehow we still have the issue that where if you run too quickly to the next set piece, your companion dialogue will get cut off. It's incredible that that's still an issue in this day and age. This is at least fixed later, with companions striking up the conversation again after being interrupted by battle. More concerning is how Varric is pitching Solas's motivations for tearing down the Veil. The way that him and Harding put it, Solas really liked how the world was before, and now he just wants to go back to that. Which means one of 3 or so things. Either Solas's character and feelings have been dumbed down, Varric's relationship and understanding of him has been overwritten, or Varric has become disgruntled with Solas over time and now acts like he's only doing all of this because he likes the aesthetics of the past. Which I really hope it's that last option and that the dwarf is trying to cope with his friend's betrayal. Our enemies at this stage are Venatori cultists, which are Tevinter mages who followed Corypheus in Inquisition. I'm not sure what their goal is now, but I imagine they have to be following the Dreadwolf now that old Corey got snapped like a toothpick. We wind up meeting with Nev, who looks like she was built for people to cosplay her. You know, like her appearance is almost manufactured and not natural. I don't know how else to describe it, I just think her outfit looks stupid. She's supposed to be our informant on Solas's whereabouts and actions, but his whereabouts and action is right in front of us and fisting the Fade. So now she's just a frost mage, which I guess is a good second choice, honestly.
I'm getting too old for this.
Nev Gallus.
As you continue to run to where Solas is performing his ritual, the dialogue becomes increasingly more grating. I knew about this from the gameplay preview before, but there's something that's very modern superhero movie.
Varric, Harding. Not the worst timing.
Based on the Venatori, you've got excellent taste in enemies.
I do my best.
No sign of Solus. Just a big glowing window or mirror or something.
Well, that sounds ominous. Well, we're not in Minrathous anymore.
The tremors are getting worse.
And we've got demons.
It's not like it's unbearable, but it's not very fun to listen to either, because we've gotten to this point where nearly every character is structured to be as quick-witted and sarcastic as Varric. I would say that Harding is the exception here. Varric was a standout along with Isabella in Dragon Age 2 because of how unserious they were compared to the likes of Maybelline, Twink Elf, Welsh Elf, Terrorist, Wallflower, and Great Value. But now this companion dialogue between him, your guy, and Nev is all kind of like that. Regardless, the plan is to sneak up on Solus when he's distracted with his world-ending magic. That plan goes out the window as soon as we get to him and Varric tries to talk him down. So instead of sneaking up on him, Varric tries to reason with the elf, gets his crossbow broken, and gets stabbed with a cool dagger. Plan B is pushing over a big statue. Nothing stops elven gods like big statues. This works, but disrupting the ritual causes the game's real antagonists to appear in the form of two ancient elven gods that were previously trapped in the Fade via the Dreadwolf's betrayal, which was not the direction that I hoped this narrative would go if I'm gonna be honest. Like, don't get me wrong, it could be worse, but the appeal to Solus betraying you after playing through an entire game is that he has really good reasons that he stands by. By bringing these new threats into the fold, you give Solus an out and make him a misguided good guy instead of a tragic villain. I just don't like that framing over what could have been had the devs decided to make this game about getting to Solus and stopping him at key intervals, until he has to either face you down and fight you to the death, or come to grips with the idea that there's a less extreme measure that could be taken. You know, like a civil rights movement or something. Still, your guy loses consciousness and his soul is transported to the Fade due to his blood being spilled at the ritual site. As it turns out, Solus has been trapped in the Fade completely, and our guy can now converse with him to try to get his side of the story, relegating the elven god back to being an ally who wants to stop the newly freed bad guys.
That's really helpful. What are you, the elven god of sarcasm?
Lies, treachery, and rebellion, depending upon the story.
Helpful advice from the elven god of, and I am quoting you here, lies, treachery, and rebellion.
Depending on the story.
Alright, so everyone in this game is full of quips and sarcasm, I guess. Which is not how Solus was in the last game at all. I mean, sure, occasionally, but he was mostly very straight-laced, particularly in dire situations. So hearing him goof off now feels less like him succumbing to his fate and more like bad writing that's more focused on audience laughs. When you wake back up in your body, you find Varric to be alive but out of commission, while Harding is injured but otherwise fine since I chose to bring her with me to topple over the statue. I know I've already hammered home the whole Marvel movie syndrome this game seems to be exuding, but there's something equally as telling that occurs throughout these last few scenes. And that is that the game begins telling you with pop-ups what people are feeling and what's happening to them based off of your choices. For instance, Varric looks sadly at you while claiming that he failed to sway Solus from his path. And the game pops up with this little text box that says, "Hey, Varric feels like he let you down because he failed to sway Solus." I know, he just said that, dude. Then Harding walks in clearly injured with her face all scratched up, and the game goes, "You chose to bring her with you, and now she has big injury." Dude, good dialogue and scenes should speak for themselves. Why is my hand being held? It's absolutely bizarre coming off of a video about Kojima going nuts with reckless abandon and zero regard for player comprehension to, hey, you shit your pants because you chose to eat that Taco Bell 2 cutscenes ago. Anyways, Varric congratulates your guy on saving the world even if 2 elven gods popped out. And then Harding goes, "Hey, by the way, we're floating around in the Fade." How the fuck do we know everything is fine on the physical plane then? This is the moment when I realized that sliding my guy's ass slider to Jumbo was a fucking mistake when wearing cloth pants, because how the fuck am I supposed to take this seriously? Thankfully there's a mirror to transform your guy at will, something that BioWare somehow conned EA into not monetizing. so I can at least slide my ass down to Hank Hill so that I don't get so goddamn horny when watching my character's cheeks clap around the home base.
We're really in the fade.
This must be some kind of Dragon Age. Nah, but seriously, it's crazy how quick this game is to just wholesale discard lore that's been built up for over a decade. You remember how scary and surreal the Fade was supposed to be in the first game? How making it into it in Inquisition was not a willing choice, but something that your character did out of reflex? How the idea that we entered and left unscathed, untransformed, untainted was a miracle? A godsend? Yeah, now it's just a magical little cozy realm where we have our floating base that's cutely called the Lighthouse. I don't know, there's no gravity to this game's established lore anymore. So the good news is that your skill tree looks like this. The bad news is that despite its appearance, it has next to zero depth. The different corners represent a smattering of abilities, weapon and stat modifiers, and 3 faction styles that suit warriors the most. At level 20, you can choose what you ultimately want to be, which is cool. I chose the Lords of Fortune background, but I personally like the Reaper playstyle, which is closer to the Mornwatch background and mirrors the Berserker Reaver that I had going on in the first game. But there just isn't enough here to make a build that's truly unique. I can get to the Reaper class in about 8 levels minimum, but I need to be level 20 to get into its skills. So I'm gonna have to spread out through the area between it and the center, and my build is gonna look pretty similar regardless of the route that I chose to get to Reaper. All that said, I still enjoy that I can choose what I want to be regardless of my starting origin, and it's not like I didn't have fun gaining new skills. It's just not a very complex system compared to previous entries. You can chat with your party members before you start planning your next move. Nev looks better without her hat veil thing and continues to be sarcastic with you. She's also open to flirting if that's what you want to do. Harding, on the other hand, is beating herself up about what happened, but insists on you not worrying about her so that we can focus on the big threat. I probably won't mention little interactions like this until we get to the companions section later on, but I figured I'd at least mention that this game lets you know when they have new dialogue. On one hand, that's a good addition that saves you the trouble of running around the hub and getting those kind of nothing conversations that don't yield anything new. On the other hand, it also makes these guys feel less like a lively crew and more like objectives to approach. From here, we have a cozy sit down and chat about options. It's agreed that we need to do the only thing that we can do and go back through the Alluvion to the ritual site and investigate. We meet up with some Veil Jumpers who grill us about what happened with the Solus confrontation. The dialogue hasn't improved much and is still punctuated with moments where I'm like, why did they say that?
It's me, Lace Harding.
We put our lives on the line to stop Solus, and we stopped him.
And we've got the scars to prove it.
All right, you stopped Solus. So why is Arleth neck deep in wild magic?
We tell them that these 2 other gods were unleashed in exchange for Solus's imprisonment, and they're like, oh my god, we're so fucked. Oh god, holy shit. Now, I will say that a decade has passed since the end of Inquisition. It's quite possible that the way that the Dreadwolf is talked about has shifted since then. But before this moment, the Dreadwolf was almost always looked at as a traitorous god who bordered on evil, a mysterious trickster who feasted on the souls of the dead with glee. He was talked about as an amalgamation of Loki and Fenrir, equal parts cunning and terrifying. And these new gods that were just unleashed were the good elven gods. So I don't quite understand this reaction from them. Like, these Dalish Veil Jumpers seem to know all about these elvish gods, even the 2 new ones that have appeared. And yet, instead of framing it like, ah shit, we traded 1 evil bastard for 2 more, or, oh man, well, it's a good thing that we traded that 1 really bad one for the 2 good ones, they go, oh my god, the Dreadwolf, he was such a hero for binding them to the Fade, and now they're out. It doesn't even feel like the same story at this stage. It feels like we went from, man, this guy's trying to intentionally destroy the world, to, man, this guy tried to do something and accidentally unleashed bigger evil. You could argue that the attitude towards Solus has shifted due to his actions during the Inquisition, but it seems odd to me that we went from someone who was potentially misunderstood and made out to be a monster to everyone seemingly knowing that he wasn't that bad after all, especially since he's the direct reason that these 2 new gods have appeared. Regardless, we leave Harding behind to cover the Veil Jumpers while they veil and jump all over the place, and Nev and my guy run off to find a Veil Jumper named Balara.
Gotcha. Oh, people. Where'd you come from? There's something kind of exciting about it. And dangerous. Really dangerous.
Okay, at this point, this has got to be a me thing, right? Like, I must be trying to be irritated or something. But come on, man, there's no fucking way this dialogue is good, right? Okay, whatever, she's quirky and I don't like it. Let's move on. The actual gameplay loop opens up in this area, spelling out how the rest of this game is going to go, and surprisingly, it's pretty damn good. I mean, yes, okay, we've gotten away from the whole open world aspect, and while some people might lament that, I personally thought that Inquisition's approach to it was awful despite the beautiful landscapes. You could say that they should have taken the open world exploration and improved it to feel more accessible and less restrictive, and that would have been a good option too. I mean, the mounts were slow as hell, there was no swimming or genuine climbing, invisible barriers plagued areas. But that's a lot of stuff to fix, and these guys only had 10 years to do it. So this is a fine alternative. Back to the more level-based... wow, there goes my voice. Back to the more level-based design like BioWare has tended to be good at, but now with better graphics and a surprisingly good action combat system. It feels weird to say this, but the combat is the most fun that I've had in a Dragon Age game. Some are gonna hate that it got away from the more traditional RPG mechanics, but that's been happening since the second game onward. Actual exploration has you traversing little set pieces and optional nooks for loot items, none of which mean anything to me right now besides the tangible equipment items. I'm sure I'll eventually figure out what a truffle is for and why it's a blue item as opposed to a white ore item, but right now I'm just kinda looking around corners to find hidden caches and siphoning shiny bits into my inventory. It's kind of funny how that simple loop has always been compelling to me, but there's something about finding chests and popping them open that never ceases to get old. Eventually, Darkspawn are introduced, which look different than they have and seem to be more feral.
Darkspawn. Here. I never would have believed it. Until today. I've never seen Darkspawn this deep into Arlothan Forest before.
Now, for all of my compliments, there is one thing that drags down the level design that BioWare has going on here. And that is just how video gaming it feels at times. Like, this whole endeavor feels like a developer meeting where they go, okay, so they get stuck here first because, I don't know, the veil's too strong. It only allows for one-way passage. Then they have to activate these artifacts which seal off the way forward until the waves of enemies are defeated. And then, I don't know, turret section?
The wall looks weak here. I bet we could break it somehow. More Darkspawn, right where you broke that wall.
Where? I don't see them. Could you give me a better hint? Like, I get that you're trying to keep things lively and not just make it a line from point A to point B with enemies in between, but these set pieces keep taking me out of it, especially when it's like, oh, I can just kill Darkspawn with this ballista, and after the last one dies, I see the door open in the distance. Why can't I just charge past them? I don't know.
Another ballista. I bet we could use it to break through that wall.
Eventually, we make it to the thing that we've been trying to make it to, which is an artifact housing one of those librarian spirits that were shown off in Inquisition's DLC. So basically a terminal that retains a load of ancient elven knowledge. We get an ogre fight before nabbing it though, which is as fun as the rest of the combat in this game and showcases the idea that there are unblockable attacks a la Sekiro or any other modern action game that has you dodging or riposting. I guess we've basically solved this formula as an industry, huh?
Well, wasn't expecting to fight an ogre today. Then again, I also didn't expect to learn that my gods are rampaging around and trying to end the world. Just one of those days.
Ugh. It's actually fascinating how my mood fluctuates throughout this game so far. I'll be coming off of a high point with combat, and then the writers go, oh boy, this is gonna get a laugh. But it doesn't get a laugh. You know why? Because I met this girl 10 minutes ago. I don't know anything about her. I haven't been endeared to her. She's not likable to me. I'm not a master-level comedy writer by any means, if that hasn't been painfully obvious throughout my time on YouTube. But if you are going to try to write a naturally funny, goofy, quirky character that gets laughs from the outlandish shit that they say, it'd be best to take a bit of time to let the player get to know them before laying it on thick with the aloof qualities.
Strife and Irulan will want to know about this. And the Blight. And the Darkspawn.
Anyways, we disable the device, the Librarian Crystal breaks, the Veil field is disabled, and we can go back to meet with the others. You're hit with a strange sort of system for your companions after this in that they don't all level with you in a traditional sense. Instead, if you complete, content with them, their bond grows closer with you, thus granting you 2 skill points per bond level. Which seems like a really odd way to go about this if you're trying to grow closer to everyone. I mean, on a surface level, I get it. Why would Alistair get closer to me and open up more if I don't take him with me? But it completely discounts other aspects to playing a game. I don't usually build a party around whether I want them to bond with me or not. I build it around what I need, a tank, a mage, a healer, whatever. So the solution that the devs came up with is having this game completely negate the need to build a balanced party. Nearly every single person can heal you besides warriors. Most of the other abilities are damage based with a few buffs, so they're all pretty much the same, which is funny because, well, I'll get to that in the companion section of this video. Regardless, the system presented here makes sense on the surface, but it feels unwieldy in a series that historically puts emphasis on class roles and getting to know everyone regardless of whether you take them with you or not. Maybe it doesn't matter, maybe you can still interact with everyone and get the exact same dialogue even if you bring the same 2 people with you everywhere, but if that were the case, then why would this bond system be a thing? Because the reality is that the bond system is basically just experience. And you can gain experience from having people agree with you when you're in camp, you can gain it by having them come with you, you can gain it from giving them gifts, it's just experience. But the devs were hell-bent on this game being about your companions and bonding with them, so I guess this is how they dressed it up. Either way, we head to the Veil Jumper camp, which is currently in a state of disarray due to ongoing Darkspawn attacks. You get more dialogue that's just grating, but even with that aside, a bigger issue is rearing its head fast. Let me spin you some quick comparisons. In Origins, you start as someone with their own past, their own story, their own prologue. You get tossed into the Grey Wardens due to events in your neck of the woods, and from then on you're fighting tooth and nail for influence and favor with other factions and your own companions. You never show up to a new area and go, "Hey, it's me, the Grey Warden," and everyone licks your balls because of it. Most of them tell you to piss off and that they have their own problems, and you have to earn your reputation with them as someone who can be trusted and depended on. You have to talk with your motley crew to earn the right to learn about them. In Dragon Age 2, we shifted to Hawk, who's very much his own person. Kirkwall doesn't look kindly on him at first. He works for years to attain respect from the citizens before he eventually becomes as well regarded as he is. The companions that you fall in line with establish a connection to him over those same years. Now, Inquisition was something else entirely, and while you do start out as an undesirable, someone who basically can't be trusted due to how you're found, you eventually prove your worth and become basically the second coming of Christ for a good 75% of the game. And of course, everyone treats the Herald of Andraste with respect, but that's because you are the main character. You were proven to be chosen. The whole story is built around that idea. Your companions share a general goal with you and get along with you to further that goal. Even people like Sarah exist as the antithesis to that at first. So what's happening in the Veilguard? Well, you're someone who was in a faction, you did something noble, and then you got picked up by Varric. There is no more to your story, no flashbacks about how you earned renown among your people, no divine intervention that spreads your name far and wide. And yet you're still treated pretty similarly to how the Herald is in Inquisition. Both random people and companions warm up to you immediately. No one ever treats you with suspicion. Everyone has the biggest and most important tasks for you, despite Varric not being attached to your hip anymore. And that treatment of you as the main character becomes apparent fast when these Veil Jumpers begin by going, "Hey, you fucked up and let Solus get away," and then immediately go, "Oh my god, Rook, you gotta help us," when you return with Balara. Oh yeah, your guy's name is Rook. And that's another good point to bring up. Rook being the name of your guy, much like Hawk in Dragon Age 2, only further points towards the idea that the writers were torn on the direction that they wanted to go here. Hawk worked as well as he did because he was a penniless scrub who got dumped into a singular location and had to work his ass off for recognition. The bonds that he develops with people happen over years and years, and it seems so much more natural for him to be depended on with the amount of time that he spends in one city. Meanwhile, Rook gets dumped off in the middle of a world-shattering event, and everyone treats him like the Herald right off the bat. The writers wanted Rook to be the new Hawk, but gave him the same scale of objectives as the Herald and Inquisition. Regardless, you get to spend some of your money in camp while dumping off valuables for more money. There's no difference in a lot of these items, they're just lump sums of gold that you can trade. There's a reputation system for each faction, with you gaining some rep with the Veil Jumpers for completing the quest that you just took on and for trading. Our next goal is to look for a different group of missing Veil Jumpers who haven't reported in, which is framed like an ingenious plan by Balara. We head off to this area and...
It's so quiet.
Too quiet.
They barricaded the main entrance into town.
To keep something out?
No, to keep something in.
Nev Gallus.
You know how everyone ripped into that Forspoken game with the girl that gets isekai'd into another realm? Dialogue and small talk like this was the primary reason for that reception. When I hear shit like this in the game that I'm reviewing, it makes me feel like I'm beating up on an easy target, you know what I mean? Like, if I intentionally sat down and reviewed Forspoken and then went in on it like this, it'd be like, come on dude, what did you expect? And that's what makes this so hard for me, because this is the fourth game in a series that I loved, one that shined the brightest with its dialogue and character interactions. Even Inquisition did that well enough. There weren't these back-to-back-to-back moments where the writing felt out of touch. But now that it's happening, I'm sitting here going, do I really need to keep commenting on this? So I'm gonna try my best not to, but I think it's inevitable at this point. We head through this village, which is absolutely fucked with blight. Honestly, from a sheer art direction, this is cool. There are a lot of little details sprinkled everywhere that you look, all of it showcasing the power of the elven gods that are angrily trying to assert their dominance over the physical realm. I can imagine being pretty damn impressed and enraptured by all of this if I had any attachment to these characters or if the dialogue was better. There's surprisingly no fighting involved in all of this. Instead, you wade through the village, find that those not dead have become brainwashed, and eventually make it to the mayor.
I know you. You're the mayor of this town.
A dragon shows up and then goes away. I clapped and forgot about this game's shortcomings upon seeing it. Then you get the option to spare the mayor or leave him to his fate. Since he was corrupted by the gods, his greediness exploited in exchange for offering up the nearby Veil Jumpers for gold. Nothing says, wow, these gods are powerful, like bribing an old man to conduct town-corrupting blood magic rather than just rolling over the village and wholesale crushing it without mercy. But let's think about this for a moment. Say you stumble into this village and everything is fine. The market is bustling, the people are cheerful. You find a few side quests to do if you so choose. One where you help save a little girl's cat from nearby darkspawn. One where you procure some ingredients for a housewife's soap. A main quest where you meet the Veil Jumpers that you're looking for, and they insist on meeting the kind old mayor to help him to train the town guard so that they can protect the village from the blight. You make friends with these people. The child with the cat thanks you by giving you her favorite toy. The housewife treats you to dinner where everyone relaxes and talks about their experiences in life. You befriend some soldiers in the town guard who start off clumsy and then become pretty good over the time that you train them. The mayor shows kindness to all who approach him, and they all trust him with their lives. The Veil Jumpers decide to stay and continue training the guard for a little bit longer. Then you leave, do some other quest, and get alerted to something happening in this town. When you show up, it looks like this. The little girl's shoes are found in a nearby pile. The cat that she had refuses to leave a collapsed house, and you infer that her remains are likely in there. The housewife is corrupted, not showing an ounce of care for the corpse of her dead husband lying nearby. The town guard that you got to know are strung up, clearly tormented before they were put down. One of them still lives, cackling like a maniac while he runs his sword through his comrade's remains. The Veil Jumpers who you got to know are found dead or dying, the epicenter of this carnage shooting out from their bodies like a supernova of decay. And when you find the mayor, his normally kind demeanor has been twisted, and he continues to count the gold that he was promised for his betrayal. You snap him out of it, and his visage falls, collapsing into tears as he sorrowfully and remorsefully explains that the tiniest shred of greed in his psyche was exploited and compounded until he decided to order his village to sacrifice the Veil Jumpers in a blood ritual. How much more impact would this scenario have on you as the player as opposed to what we actually got? I'm sure that it varies from person to person, but why is it that me, as someone who's never written for anything besides these videos, can come up with a scenario that lends this setup much more impact, and an entire team of writers just went, I don't know, just make a cool blight village, with no further thought? I genuinely do not understand the point of creating all of this without giving it any more context. Either way, what we do get is a mayor who we don't know saying that he did this out of greed because the gods are so powerful. He also says that he did it because he thought that if he sacrificed the Veil Jumpers, then his villagers would be spared, which are two completely different motivations that only further showcase the idea that the writers were just throwing anything and everything at the wall to see what might stick. Choosing to spare him has Harding and Ballara upset with you because he caused all of this in their eyes. But we don't know if that's true because we have zero fucking context. Was he always a greedy bastard? Was he always a tyrant? Did he used to be a decent guy before this? Was he truly trying to save the village by sacrificing the Veil Jumpers? We don't know. And not even Ballara goes, oh, this guy, I should have known he'd do this. Or, I can't believe this, you were such a good person. So yeah, with no context, I have no interest in leaving this guy to die because I don't know anything about him. He could have easily been another victim in all of this. Anyways, you get a scene with Varric saying, wow, these gods sure are powerful, huh? And then you just go back to the previous map, which basically just shows how much thought was put into this whole last 10-minute foray. It wasn't meant to be an area to explore, an arena to fight Darkspawn, a tough moral choice, an impactful story with complex emotional scenes. It was meant for the game to go, wow, look at how bad these guys are. Now get back to work. You know, I wrote sigh in my script, but I don't feel like sighing into my mic, so just pretend I sighed. We go back to the village and Morrigan shows up. I clapped and forgot about all of this game's shortcomings. Please don't fucking do this, BioWare. So yeah, she's cosplaying as MF Doom but ran out of metal for her mask, I guess. I don't know why. It looks uncomfortable. But she's a completely different person at this stage in BioWare development. It's funny because I actually praised Inquisition's take on her. I noted that she was still this broody and self-absorbed person, but that she's gotten less guarded. That having a child changed her for the better, and now her character arc was nicely completed when she showed how much that child meant to her. And now apparently she's just swooping in to save the world. Hey guys, it's me, Morrigan. You might know me from helping to save the world a few times, and I'm here to reprise my role in order to fulfill the fans. Who, me? Why, I just happen to be an old friend to this Veil Jumper guy and am now stepping up to help someone else save the world again.
Ah, yes. The legendary sanctum of the Dreadwolf.
Yeah, it's over. The long and short of this conversation is Morrigan offering her assistance however she can, her formerly bombastic and interesting personality being reduced to a field guy for you, a guy that she's never met until now. From here you can go off after Solas's dagger, which Morrigan pointed you towards as a source of power that can be wielded against the gods. Before doing so, you get a scene where Harding is beating herself up, which I don't really care about. Though these guys definitely refer to Varric as if he died, talking about him in past tense as if his injuries are unrecoverable or something along those lines, which wouldn't surprise me.
Oh no, what if it took the dagger? Look, there it goes.
Good thing I've got a ranged attack. So we chase this thing across Hell's Half-Acre, which is still fun even with the companions chattering in my ear about how much we need to open gates and kill enemies. We make it to this thing, take it out, and recover the Lyrium dagger, which Harding touches. Upon doing so, she gains magic powers. It's like bad fanfiction. I'd go into how dwarves have a natural resistance to run-of-the-mill lyrium as established in Origins, how red lyrium was the more potent version that could drive them crazy much easier as established in Dragon Age 2, how they've never had magic powers until one specific case in Inquisition, and so on, but it doesn't matter. Because this is just what we're being shown now. Someone could argue that red lyrium is bullshit based off of Origins, how dwarven titan magic and Inquisition is bullshit because dwarves have never been capable of any magic based off of the previous 2 games. And now we gotta accept whatever the hell this is and wait for the game to explain it to us now. So I'm just gonna accept its inclusion at this point and hope that it has a good explanation beyond attempting to create a hype moment with Aura. The chat afterwards concludes with Harding claiming that she feels connected to the stone. Basically, dwarves can't connect to the Fade the same way that other races can because of their connection with the earth, which is something that's described as stone sense. Those that live underground tend to carry that sense with them throughout their lives and utilize it to feel out how a cave system is structured, sensing lyrium veins and the shape of rocks throughout their underground kingdom. Surface dwarves tend to either forget about their stone sense or are born without it. And while that connection is severed practically, it never seems to go away completely, causing them to still resist Fade magic regardless of their lack of connection to the stone. So we can at least deduce that Harding's newfound connection to the stone and her development of magic is probably related to the Titans, which are giant primordial beings that shaped the earth and were struck down by the elves forever ago. I'm paraphrasing a bunch of knowledge from the Descent DLC, which I never covered on this channel, but the long and short of it is that the Titans are still a relatively unknown quantity, are likely the creators of the dwarves, and can still somehow be tapped into to imbue dwarves with their own brand of magic called Titan magic. It's all pretty new stuff, and it isn't actually a bad plot point for the universe. As hard as I've been on the Veilguard thus far, I'm all for it trying to take something that was previously discounted as dwarves are good at mining in the earlier games. The chat wraps up with a flirtation opportunity with Harding, who returns your comment by claiming that she's really happy that you're around and how great you are. I think we've had a grand total of 2 one-on-one conversations with her and have known her for maybe a week at the very most. But hey, we're Rook, and no one is going to deny us whatsoever. Fuck making a character dislike you or show any sort of caution. You're a goddamn stud and everyone loves you. They should have done this with Morrigan, or Cassandra, or Sten, or Aveline, or Fenris, or Solus, or Vivienne. The plan now is to contact Solus for a plan. This means setting up in our own designated room and placing some random trinkets from our past, which does sound like a great call, but even when the devs do take the time to let you learn about your guy, it's all just the most mundane and cookie-cutter shit imaginable. Basically, you place down 4 objects. The first one is a mirror from Varric. Your guy goes, "Ah yeah, Varric. Good guy. Said I was gonna be a hero." Cool. The second one has to do with your faction. "I drank from this cup after getting out of the Lords of Fortune. Crazy how that noble double-crossed us." Next is your race. "Here's some Kunari face paint that we got from a merchant. Crazy how I'm a Kunari." And finally, your class. "Wow, the old warrior book from when I was warrior training. Crazy how I'm a warrior." It would honest to God kill the writers to make any part of your backstory appealing or compelling. The chat with Solus leads to some concrete answers about what the gods are trying to accomplish on their way to total power over Thedas. It isn't anything crazy, but it is at least something. The way that Solus puts it, they needed his dagger so that they could rip the veil open, reach into it, and tap into the full power of the Blight. As it turned out, a tiny fragment of the Blight was what escaped when the Tevinter Magisters pierced the veil to the Golden City centuries ago, and that tiny fragment is what caused the repeated Blights throughout Thedas' history. Which, I'm actually happy to hear this game linked to the very first scene in the very first Dragon Age game by reconfirming what exactly happened with the Magisters when they tore open the veil. That's a really fun inclusion that ties together all of the knowledge and mystery that's been accumulating across these games. Accessing the full load of Blight is unimaginable, something that would absolutely destroy the world with no compromise. Why would these gods want that? Well, because they're evil, which is a terrible choice as a motivator. You know, it'd be one thing if these gods came down and began uplifting various civilizations, gaining worshippers at an alarming rate. Every time they help a village, town, city, faction, whatever, those chunk of people slowly but surely become brainwashed and unbending in their devotion. And how can you talk them out of it? These gods came down and helped their society to flourish in their eyes. It adds a stint of ambiguity to whether you're doing the right thing or not. And then of course you could have them reveal their true colors and show these various factions beginning to corrupt or whatever you want. It would be better if that didn't happen, but say you really want that black and white evil. There are ways to obtain it without being obvious immediately, and can even play around with certain companions choosing to defect if you don't sway them towards believing that you're on the right side of history. But instead what we have is sheer chaotic evil. They want the blight to spread because they think that's the ultimate form of life. They want to rule over corrupted, terrible people while the rest of the world burns. They're just any other mindless parasitic enemies that you would see in sci-fi works like the Zerg, the Flood, run-of-the-mill zombies, etc. And that's honestly pretty standard for Dragon Age with the exception of Dragon Age 2. I can't fault the writers for going down the "these guys are bad and want bad people to follow them" route because that's historically worked. But it worked because the companions were usually brilliant and the stories attached to their struggles were compelling. And at the end of Inquisition, it felt like we reached a point with the Dreadwolf story where we could finally have another antagonist who wasn't just a basic evil. But that was taken away immediately at the start of the Veilguard. I don't know, like I said, I guess it's par for the course in these games. After all of this, Solas tells you to apologize to Varric for him. You head over to the dwarf and he goes, "Ah, so old Solas told you the truth, huh? Yeah, I just got done meditating and talking to Solas in my dreams. There is no way that Varric is alive if he knows what was said without me reiterating." Get ready for that Sixth Sense twist later on. So Varric tells you that you have to lead and then goes on about how great you are.
Fresh water from this pitcher after Varric and I got out of the trap set by that double-crossing noble.
The noble betrayed us and left us to die in an ancient ruin collapsing around us.
That scheming noble locked us up inside that tomb. Tightest corner I've ever been in.
Holy shit, what a crazy adventure my guy had.
You've got a knack, kid.
For what?
Finding a way through the wildest shit I've ever seen.
Are you out of your fucking mind? Varric was there when Kirkwall's chantry exploded due to terrorism via his own friend. He saw the Templar leader corrupt and turn into ash because of red lyrium. He witnessed the Herald of Andraste build up the Inquisition and jump into and out of the Veil, stopping Corypheus in his tracks. But no, apparently my guy navigating the wacky tomb adventure was the craziest shit that he's ever seen. I mean, at this point you kinda have to say that this is just Rook's own ego imagining what Varric would say to him or something. I mean, it says a lot about Rook's lack of questioning and willingness to get praised if he doesn't at least raise his eyebrows at that statement. This is not the way to warm a player up to the main character, and I don't know why BioWare of all game companies is struggling with that. Either way, you get to pick through Varric's brain after this about how he feels about the few decisions that you've made already, along with how your guy feels about Solas. Now we're going into this whole thing with the whole Varric is dead theory, right? So to support that, he can't give us key information that our guy wouldn't know or be able to ascertain for himself. And that's exactly how this goes. Varric tells you that sometimes you have to make hard decisions, but that what should matter is that you let your team be heard and guide them regardless. He doesn't weigh in on you sparing the mayor or bringing Harding with you and getting her hurt, he just reassures you. And to conclude this chat, he claims that you'll need more allies. And instead of saying, go pick up Durkin the Brave out in Orlais, he says, "I'll bet Nev knows where to find more contacts." So yeah, everything's green so far on this brave new plot twist from the writers. Nev points us towards the Antivan Crows and the Shadow Dragons for contacts that she knows of, but not before saying,
"Back to Minrathous.
Capital city and heart of Tevinter.
This game has a terrible habit of simultaneously expecting players to have a decent grasp on Dragon Age lore and then treating them like dumbasses when introducing new concepts or entities. Like the game goes, "Yeah, here's the Dreadwolf, he's trying to merge the Fade with our reality. If you want more info, check the glossary." Which is completely fine because this is the 4th entry. But then they'll introduce something new and repeat it ad nauseum like a children's cartoon in order to impress the idea onto their audience.
This is it. This is where it was kept.
Where what was kept?
The archive spirit, or as the ancient elves called it, the Nodus Derthalin.
I am the Nodus Derthalin.
Where'd the spirit go? The Nodus Derthalin, I mean.
Near the Nodus Derthalin.
Wait, you found the Nodus Derthalin? The archive spirit?
What is it exactly?
It's the Nodus Dirthalin, the 8th archive.
Either way, we head to the Alluvian, we head to the Alluvian, the magic mirror which links to other locations. This has us jumping back into the crossroads, which have gotten a revamp since Inquisition. And again, this is where the game shines. The layout of the whole crossroads area is awesome. Unlocking new areas has you exploring for loot, taking out tougher enemies, grabbing their essence, and slotting it into doors. Everything is built off of convenience and instant gratification, as seen by the fact that you can use abilities unique to companions who you may have not brought with you by utilizing Solas's dagger to summon their power. So a broken artifact that would require Bellara's tinkering is still able to be fixed without her being here, which begs the question of why tinkering would even be a thing in this game. And the answer to that really spells out how the devs thought when designing the Veilguard. When you look at previous entries, skills like lockpicking, door smashing, trap detecting, and so on were relegated among your party the way that you saw fit a lot of the time. You might not personally have the capability of accessing some arcane lock, but that's partially why you bring a mage along with you. And that's the way that these guys initially designed the Veilguard. But there's this ADHD-riddled mindset that affects a percentage of gamers nowadays. Hey, I brought a full party of 3 mages and a warrior, why can't I lockpick this? You're telling me I need to bring a rogue to not miss out on loot? And I'll be the first to admit that sometimes I think that way with certain games or situations. That feeling of, I forgot to bring this guy with me and now I can't get this chest. But the answer to that is, yeah, I'm going to miss a chest. I can come back later, sucks to suck. So when you see the devs have this same sort of idea, the idea that Bellara can tinker with certain artifacts to get them going, and then you see them negate that requirement, it kind of just tells you that they were more interested in catering to that kind of action, action, action mindset. There needs to be loot here, everyone should get it, and it should be satisfying. And there is merit to that, a moment where you go, oh shit, I didn't need to bring her to get this? Sick. Which is all the devs wanted. And that philosophy flows into every other major and minor facet of this game. There aren't a host of weapons and armor that have slightly different names and looks to them with tiny stat increases. There are instead a handful of bows, axes, swords, armor, and so on. And they get upgraded in quality if you find or buy them again. You can further increase their rank to +1, 2, etc. if you spend resources collected in the field. All of your shinies are traded for gold or are used to upgrade your shit. There's no fall damage or penalty for falling off of the path. Your skills can be refunded at will, allowing you to completely change your build whenever you want to. It's just a solid system that puts player satisfaction first and doesn't try to do anything deeper, which I honestly respect. I know that a lot of boomerish types tend to get upset with stuff like this. Oh, this isn't how video games used to be, and that is true. It is not how they used to be. But I also feel that with the way that this game plays now and how the dialogue and story have gone thus far, that a really in-depth and complex system would actually feel much worse, because the flavor would completely mismatch the overall experience. When I save up the gold to buy a limited quantity single-use item to reset a skill tree in a more traditional RPG, I expect that requirement for that transaction to be there. I'm resetting a character that I put a lot of thought into building, and the mechanics outside of that transaction are suited to the effort needed to wipe that slate clean and start anew. It causes me to think hard about my choices and the new way that I build my guy. It caters to logic. This game caters to emotion. I'm not having fun as a Reaper, let me try the Slayer instead. I'm having a hard time against this boss, let me switch my build. Either way, you can explore a decent chunk of these crossroads, obtaining upgrades and shinies while unlocking new parts of it. When you get through with having fun, you can choose one of 2 routes to go not have fun in. I decided to go with the Antivan Crow route because I'm still holding on to the good times with Zevran and I'm ready for the game to crush those memories with whatever shit show the Crows are going to bring to the table here. You wind up in Treviso, which is just a real city in Italy. The in-game one is currently under occupation by invading Kunari. Some field guide meets you on a bridge and guides you through the city while loudly exclaiming that the Crows will soon put an end to the Kunari occupation.
And one day, I will see a knife through every would-be tyrant's throat.
Yeah, boy, do I hate tyrants. Gross, tyrants. Good thing these dipshit Kunari soldiers can't understand us. I wind up getting sidetracked by the market area, which has a menagerie of merchants selling a cavalcade of shit ranging from statue, painting, fruit, other trinkets. I think some of this is room decor. I didn't figure out what the rest is until way later when I was like, oh, you can just buy shit from these guys and then sell them for reputation at other places. As of right now, I had no fucking idea what this stuff was besides equipment and furniture. All the merchants are eccentric, don't say much about being occupied, and generally have no substance. Like, I'd love to ask the Kunari merchant how they feel about the occupation, but I think they just tell me how cool their stock is while simultaneously not reacting to my purchase. At least I get to pet a rooftop cat, which is very wholesome and makes me clap while forgetting about this game's shortcomings. We zipline to a casino. Yeah, the city that's occupied by presumably hostile forces haven't bothered to tear down the... You know what? Whatever. It's cool, right? Isn't it cool to zipline? Aren't casinos cool? Man, when I play the game, I want cool to be the first thing I think.
Let's go gambling!
Anyways, the casino doesn't mean anything. It's just a cool thing to say. It breaks one of the biggest rules of game design, show, don't tell. You don't get to play some games or stroll through the main lobby to take in the sights of degenerate gambling and a shady den of grimy but luxurious accoutrements. You instead get to watch a scene where the boss of the Antivan Crows greets you with zero suspicion or anything remotely resembling caution, and then tells you that the person you came to retrieve is her grandson and that he's being held captive in a nearby crypt.
My cousin is still alive? And you didn't think to tell me?
Because I wasn't here, the main character.
But you brought it up now. Why?
Because I trust you, a complete stranger, to rescue my grandson from peril, and definitely not these rigorously trained killers who have ascended to the top of the leadership in this faction. Whatever, time to go rescue this mage killer, the guy who was captured by mages. He's currently being kept in an underwater crypt because that's a cool setting. The cousin leads us to the docks and goes, I can't believe the old lady didn't tell me about this until now. She probably knew I would do something rash. Then we get to the canoe and he goes, all right, I'm out of here, see ya. What a rash man.
So, this is the ossuary. This doesn't look like any prison I've seen.
We're underwater.
Oh, so the place is underwater.
I can't believe all this is underwater.
All right, look, I could just keep doing this, but we're never gonna get through this game if I do. So we make it to the prison, and we're about to fight, and our guy frees himself from, I don't know, carbonite or something. Then he runs around with big demon bird wings and kills everyone. It's like bad fan fiction. He insists on finishing his contract before we can leave, causing us to forge further in and take out the mages and abominations. It's actually not a terrible premise, all things considered, because the writers did take the time to try to make it work. Basically, our new companion named Lucanus is sharing a body with a demon, which seems to be helpful for now. Harding warns you that that's probably not going to go well, but we need whatever we can get in our fight against the gods. The Venatori were keeping him here because they're interested in creating new types of demons, which is what this underwater prison is all about. So yeah, it's not that bad of a setting, I'm just angry and it's affecting my ability to analyze properly. Actually, the structuring of this entire section of the game reminded me of something that I didn't actually draw the connection to until now. This game's gameplay is heavily reminiscent of Jedi Fallen Order, and that makes complete sense given the parent's company and how this game was allowed to be single player. The more that I play it, the more parallels there are. The straightforward level design, the focus on combat and platforming, the occasional puzzle, the bosses and mini-bosses sprinkled throughout the areas that you progress through. The combat itself is a lot less comparable to a Souls-like, but the entire structuring and sensation of each spat of gameplay is pretty spot on to how I felt about Jedi, which I did enjoy thoroughly while not being completely enamored by the plot. Though speaking of Souls-like, some of the spells that I see these mages cast are awfully familiar looking, but that's more of an observation, I'm not upset about it or anything. Spelunking through the prison has you experiencing the first real level of the game. Side routes are more abundant, loot is everywhere, you slide down one-way routes because that's always fun, you charge through areas with breakable boxes like a bowl in a china shop, and Lucanus brings an ability to the table where you can create platforms from the Fade to skip across. When encountering a hallway of enemies, I mashed my way to death, which doesn't have you switching off to an ally, you just fucking game over screen. And it really hammers home just how different this game is, because while some enemies will occasionally focus on your allies, most of the time they're just singling you out. And that goes both ways, as your ranged scouts will go, "Hey, these guys are attacking at range," and then just let them pummel you from afar. It feels less like you're a unit of comparable level fighters and more like you're the main character and these recruits are following you around. We're so far removed from that tactical approach that other games encompass to varying degrees, where you can assign combat options to your people and have them take care of areas where your guy has weaknesses. Because this isn't a Dragon Age game, it's a modern EA action game wearing Dragon Age's skin. And the more that I play it, the more that becomes abundantly clear. So we fight to the center and the boss is a vampire, I guess. I mean, not really, but look at him. He's a vampire. We kill him and teleport out, giving us another round of Varric narration. This time it shows the Venatori agent who created the underwater prison, who looks just like a vampire. I mean, takes a bath in blood, looks like a pale vampire lady stereotype. I guess that's just what the Venatori are now. They went from being meddling peons and weak-willed followers of Corypheus to shit like this, I guess. Making it back to Italy has the home base of the Crows in shambles. That's right, the Venatori came in here, tossed the tables over, and committed all sorts of crazy property damage. I think. I mean, the place looks like a wood hut and not a casino, but maybe this is the backroom area? Or fuck, maybe they tore down all the decor and wallpaper, holy shit. Also, they kidnapped the leader of the Crows while everyone else is unscathed. You know, in the confusion of things. There was an assload of confusion, and all the other leaders got the wool pulled over their eyes. Did I ever tell you how crazy well regarded these vicious assassins used to be in previous games?
Sarah came for us here, in my house. She took Katerina from my house. You find her and cut her heart out, Lucanis. Vi and I will hold down the fort.
Just when I thought I was out, they pull me back in.
When you make it back to the base, the ensuing chat reveals that the demon possessing Lucanus is a demon of spite.
Let me talk to them! I want to talk to Ra!
I'm glad the demon knows that I'm the main character also, he'll fit right in. After this, you're told that you can free roam around Treviso for side quests if you want, and that's a huge issue for me right now because there are a lot of little things to do. Chests to find, people to fight, everything you could want in a game in the action-adventure genre. This is one of those things that people were saying when the Veilguard was first revealed. Hey, it looks like the combat and exploration stuff is fun. And it is. But I don't play BioWare games for combat and exploration. I play them for story, companions, compelling dialogue. And if you put this side by side with games that make the action-adventure stuff their primary focus, then this falls into the pretty good category, but not outstanding. I have no real drive to take the time to sweep and clear out these areas of the game. If you don't care at all for story in your games, then the Veilguard is a great purchase because there is a lot of content here to soak up your time. But I'm not going to bother with most of this stuff and just keep pressing onward. Our next quest centers around Nev, and is found in some muddy part of Minrathous called Docktown. Nev begins narrating like a detective because she's a detective, and I guess that's just what they do.
Minrathous, the heart of Tevinter. Somehow the beast of it always pulls me back.
Then one of the shadow dragons recognizes her and goes, "Ah, hey, you want info, don't you?" My guy steps in and starts leading the conversation, and they go along with that because he's the main character. I would kill for one of these people to go, "Whoa, hang on, who the fuck are you?" We begin a chase through town where we're following the remnants of a smuggler who is running red lyrium to the Venatori. Nev reveals that she isn't so much a detective as someone who has access to a relic that can expose fade shades, which then tell her where to go next. Kinda minimizes her entire shtick, doesn't it? We come to a dead end and a Templar captain shows up to question us. Her and Nev know each other, and my guy goes, "Wait, don't Templars and mages hate one another?" Which is actually a great bit of lore to dive into. I covered it in my previous videos, but basically the structure of the Templar-Mage Chantry relationship is completely different in Tevinter than it is in a place like Ferelden. It's a fascinating fragment of lore for a place that we've never actually been able to explore up until now. But the dialogue here simply dismisses it.
This isn't the South. I work to stop illegal magic, that's all.
Oh, okay, cool. It's not the South. Imagine having rich lore about the varying power structure of this location and boiling it down to, yeah, it's not that other place. But really, this is just how this entire game is written. Fuck the lore, fuck making things morally gray or interesting, everything is evil or good with no in between. We track the smuggler, take him down, and it turns out that the Knight Commander of the Templars has been bought off by the smuggler's dad.
My son is no cultist. He was completely misled. I appreciate your help, Knight Commander. Let's go.
Nice try. The Venatori rise.
Kids' cartoons have more subtlety and nuance than this game. I keep thinking to myself, man, am I being unfair to the Veilguard? Am I saying this stuff in bad faith? But every time I see a scene like this unfold, I just can't help but to react this way. It'd be like if the werewolves in Origins were just plain evil monsters, if the Qunari had no nuance and were just pure bad guy invaders in Dragon Age 2. It's no wonder they shit-canned the idea of Solus being the main antagonist in this game. That'd be way too much moral ambiguity to work through. Varric once again steps in to talk about what just went on, revealing another enemy that we'll be facing down the road, a pale-faced vampire lady. Yeah, I know. We do some house cleaning for the Shadow Dragons after this, namely clearing out some Darkspawn blight that showed up in their back alley. The game continues to trample over lore for cool guy points just because it's fun. In this case, the Venatori now appear to be allied with or are controlling the Darkspawn. At this point, it just has to be intentionally to piss people off, right? You take the one core chaotic evil in this universe and you go, yeah, but what if these mindless followers could control them? And of course you can't explain it. The elven gods are blighted and they use the blight to assert dominance, so their followers can too. The connection is there.
The gods gave the Venatori a relic they can use to control Darkspawn.
But it really minimizes the severity of what the blight is and has been throughout this series. When Darkspawn showed up, no one was their ally. It was just this sweeping, gnarly evil. Now they're teaming up with human cultists because fuck it, why not? It's the cherry on top that really emphasizes the fact that these guys just view all evil on the same scale regardless of origin. And I honestly probably wouldn't have as big of an issue with it if the rest of this game was written really well. It'd be like, oh, okay, so because of the gods showing up, their followers can now do this. Fine. But because of all the other issues that I've had with the game, I can't buy into it.
We found documents from the Knight Commander. I knew he was crooked. I didn't think he was actually a Venatori.
When we get back to the Shadow Dragon base, something incredible happens, like a shooting star of writing.
How do we know we can even trust you? You're not from here. You don't know Minrathous like we do. And we know as little about you as we do these risen gods you unleashed.
Now, what is it they say? The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
And there it goes. Well, at least the idea was thrown out there, which is further than I ever thought we'd make it. So I'd count this one as a win. It really is crazy how far we've come from Origins though. You had this game where everyone was at each other's throats while the blight ripped through Ferelden. Nah, fuck you, we're dwarves, we're worried about the next king. Nah, we got werewolves to deal with. It was a lot of people who were just worried about their own bullshit while a bigger threat loomed. And it was realistically frustrating to hear them insist on you solving their problems before they would fight with you. Now you've got a game where literally every faction is like, oh shit, elven gods you say? Not only do I believe you wholeheartedly, I'm dropping everything to help out. So yeah, the black and white writing goes both ways, I guess. Speaking of, we head to the Grey Wardens for help next, and they're just cops now. Like you go in and they're like, you released the blight, you stupid fuck. Which is a fair assessment of what happened, absolutely. To them, I literally caused all of this because they just didn't know about Solus despite him being heavily involved in the issues they had a decade ago. And my guy doesn't have enough self-awareness to frame the events leading up to this new blight in a way that makes more sense to them. He just goes, Okay, so first off, there was this elven god, and he tried to tear down the veil and kill everyone, but I stopped him, and 2 more gods came out and they used the blight as a weapon. Like, anyone is gonna listen to that. So yeah, I'm actually on the same page as the Grey Wardens so far. But then this guy goes, "You're coming with me, we're arresting you for making bad shit happen." What the fuck are you talking about? You don't have that power? You remember when the Wardens didn't give a fuck about people's backgrounds or mistakes? All they cared about was stopping the blight? That they would take whoever they could and ally with whoever would help them to end the March of Darkspawn without giving a shit about politics or anything of that sort. Well, now they're just cops.
Let me tell you something about the blight. It is evil, it is implacable, and above all, it is predictable. The blight has not changed in over 1,000 years.
The blight has changed in capability and predictability multiple times throughout the course of this guy's lifespan. And just in case you're thinking, well, maybe this guy's just an uninformed recruit. He's literally the leader of the entire Grey Warden faction. So yeah. Dorian shows up next to haughtily put down the first warden before claiming that he and a friend started the Shadow Dragons in order to improve the Tevinter Imperium when he came back from the Inquisition, which tracks as far as his motivations went in the previous game. It doesn't really matter though, we hardly see him throughout the rest of this game. You head back and talk to Varric, who continues to not answer anything that he hasn't told you about in the past. Harding walks in and doesn't acknowledge anything that he's saying, claiming that she knows of a Grey Warden couple who might be able to help us out. I find it fascinating how this game continues to throw in new ideas and go against established conventions of the universe, but then just doesn't explain them in the slightest. A married Grey Warden couple is a unique idea because Wardens historically avoid relationships due to their shortened lifespans. So the idea that these two found each other within the ranks of the Wardens is a fun twist that could definitely work out. But the game doesn't even go into that idea in the slightest. Like, you have these parts of the Veilguard's writing that could really work to enrich the universe, but the writers have no interest in it. The couple points us towards our next companion, Davrin. He's a warden with a griffin pet. While I want to knock the game for seemingly wanting to cheaply wow the player with a cute mythical creature, this actually isn't a terrible inclusion overall. Griffins went extinct during the 4th Blight, but there was a clutch of eggs that were preserved with the hopes of the species being reborn, meaning that this must be one of them. So yeah, it's not a bad idea overall. But I also can't help but to raise an eyebrow at my guy's reaction. He basically goes, "Oh, a griffin, how delightful." You know, instead of like, "Holy shit, what is that? It looks like an extinct creature that I've never seen in my life and have heard about in legend." But honestly, this next stint of game is actually pretty good. I know, I'm just as shocked. Davrin insists on hunting down the nearby Darkspawn, and we take off while the Griffin tracks clues and helps us to progress. Along the way, we find 2 Griffin trainers who were mauled by Darkspawn. Davrin seems sad, but he doesn't break down or anything like that, he just hardens his emotions and presses on, which is exactly what I want to see out of the Grey Wardens. Another antagonist makes itself known in the form of what the Wardens here are calling the Gloom Howler. This appears to be some kind of advanced form of Darkspawn, much like the Architect in Origins. The irony here is that it turns out to be a pale white elf lady, just letting you know that one in advance. Its goal for now is to birdnap the other 12 griffins which have been housed in this hidden eyrie, something that's been kept under wraps by the Wardens for however long. The lead up to this confrontation is actually great. The gameplay, as always, is fun as hell, the stormy setting is appropriate, and the end result has the griffins being taken before we can even fight this talking Darkspawn. While there are still hints of the writers trying to keep things lighthearted, it's a well-rounded quest that immediately leads into something more dire. 2 dragons have begun to attack both Treviso and Minrathous simultaneously. Your companions plead their case for which one we should aid, with Lucanus claiming that Treviso has no defenses, and Nev stating that if the ruling party in Minrathous is weakened from this attack, then the Venatori will be able to take the crown and hand over the city to the Elven Gods. Which is probably the most compelling reasoning for anything that we've gotten out of this game. However, and I hate to do this because we might actually be rolling into something good for once, but realistically Minrathous has been built up to be this absolute powerhouse of a capital city. like a floating fortress armed with Star Wars magic space lasers operated by some of the most advanced mages in the world. The Tevinter Imperium has always been talked about in an almost scary way. Their power structuring has put the advancement of magic above all else, with the Circle of Mages assuming direct control over most of the ruling systems in place. You see this in small details around even the slums of the city, with its floating magic-infused newspaper dispensaries and the like. So in all honesty, having 3 people show up to help should not make a difference. But I know how these guys write by now, and there is a 98% chance that if I choose not to help, then the city will somehow get blown away by a single dragon and some Venatori. So there's 2 ways to look at this. Either we help the town that has no defenses by comparison to Minrathous, or we help Minrathous, which is a much more powerful ally down the road. Honestly, I don't care enough about either city or the corresponding companion to be invested here. It's just way too early on and there hasn't been enough detail or good writing. But I will say that the game basically goes, hey, either you stop this little town's water supply from being poisoned, or prevent a Venatori coup which will surely devastate the power structure of the capital city. So I decide to see what happens in both. To compare and contrast, both have you fighting dragons of different colors. In Treviso, the Qunari are aiding the chaos by destroying whatever they can while the dragon runs wild, which doesn't make any fucking sense because they already occupied the city. If they wanted to destroy it, then they just would have done that. In Minrathous, those giant laser beams that were displayed at the start of the game do not come into play at all. Both sides have you meeting with your companion and then heading into an arena where one of the elven gods greets you. Her name is Gillinane. I just didn't want to say that. The other one's name is Elgardon. Also did not want to say it, but here we are. Anyways, Gil points at Rook and sicks her dragon on him in the hopes of recovering Solus's magic funtime dagger. There's been a point made repeatedly that if they can use the dagger to open up the Fade, then they can gain unmatched blight power to cause devastation, so this dagger is very important to them. You would think that this would mean that Gil would join the battle personally and just clobber our guy, but she has the dragon withdraw after it takes some damage, and that's the end of these events. The fight itself looks hilariously like every other dragon fight in every other Dragon Age game. Like, it's uncanny because you just hit its legs while it swipes at you. Sometimes it flaps off and shoots, but mostly it just stands there like a jackass. Like, I've described dragon battles in every single one of these games, and they're all just like this, with minimal difference. Maybe this is just how dragons are. I don't know. The aftermath of these 2 choices share the same tone, but one made me feel much worse than the other. Well, much worse is relative, but you know what I mean. Like, if I cared about everyone. When Minrathous falls, Nev is pissed at you, as are the Shadow Dragons. The city has been seized by the Venatori, and you're an asshole for daring to help a town with no aerial or magical defenses. It's not my fault the magical capital of the world couldn't handle some ground agents and 1 dragon. You don't understand, it's a super dragon. It can only be defied by 3 dudes in a pit. On the other hand, the devastation to Treviso has the crows going, fuck man, this sucks. But you know what, we're gonna get them back. Lucanus is crushed, and while he's happy that you helped Minrathous, he just can't bring himself to feel anything but sorrow for his city. So yeah, I'm gonna go with the save file where Minrathous fell, entitled Pricks. Plus, let's be honest, the big magic city being against us feels like it has the potential for a lot more interesting writing. It does not fulfill that potential, but hey, it was there. Heading back to talk with Solus has him going, yeah, it makes sense that the Venatori have joined the gods, and it also makes sense that the Qunari have. No, it doesn't. It completely bastardizes just how terrifyingly independent the Qunari were as a people. When the world was facing the end times and Inquisition, the Iron Bull reached out to your Inquisitor and made a once-in-a-lifetime offer on behalf of the Qunari. It was unheard of. The idea that the Qun would ever work with another faction to oust a potentially greater power was incredulous, and that's what made that instance a very fun inclusion. Now apparently they'll kowtow to whoever they deem to be powerful, even if it means that they'll become blighted in the process. It's fucking stupid. Just make a new franchise if you're gonna write shit this way. Some semantics are traded back and forth between these two from here, with Solas babbling about how he intended to minimize the loss of life when tearing open the veil and rehousing the other gods in a more permanent prison. You're told that you need to find 2 more companions, a Fate expert and a dragon hunter, which you relay to the others. Varric hobbles in and is unsurprisingly completely ignored again, and our journey to pick up our last 2 companions begins. There is one more thing to note about what's going on here with Nev, who decides to hang back for now and help around Minrathous, and that is that our decision to not help out has hardened her. And part of me likes this idea, right? Like we chose between 2 companions and the one that gets left behind suffers consequences. In this case, she can no longer heal the party, romancing her is cut off, and her offensive moves get stronger. That's cool. But it feels so cheap compared to the previous games, where you had to pick through option after option. Hardening was something that happened as the result of many events all corresponding to your choices and helping to mold someone into the person that they had to become in order to look themselves in the mirror. These events gradually happened over the course of the game, when you had gotten to completely know and understand your companion's motivations. This one happens near the front end and is a result of you choosing one of 2 options. You don't really know Nev a lot at this stage, even after playing through the available companion quests that she was given at this point in time. I don't know, it just feels like the writers are going through the motions and just shoving in required facets of the series wherever they can so that they can meet their quota. And it was right around this stage that I realized that I've been piling on this game for 90% of this video, and that I'm not giving its strengths a fair chance. So I decided to head back to the first area of the game and do some exploration and side questing. Really clear my mind and just enjoy it for what it's worth. I still don't intend to sweep through these areas and analyze all the quests and all that stuff. But you know what? I did have fun. The side quests that I got were generally the same kind of, hey, these veil jumpers are missing, and you just go off and look for them. But your search is interesting. It takes you up and down around various checkpoints, trying to unlock shortcuts in order to get to your destination. You fight and find loot, you gain equipment and reputation. It's mindless fun. If you shut your brain off and say, hey, I'm just gonna explore this forest for a bit, then this game is great. It's interesting roaming around and seeing a big chest hanging out in the water. The area is beautiful, you slink around to find some magic beams, create a bridge in the middle, and fight a pretty cumbersome mini-boss. And you're rewarded with an awesome helmet, some valuables, upgrades, and so on. You find totems that have you playing a mini-game for more max health and skill points. It's just fundamentally a fun time. And it's baffling that the parts that I dread most about this game are the main story events when I have this much fun just kicking around with the superfluous stuff. In a way, it harkens back to the design philosophy for Inquisition, but in a much more BioWare way. You see, their motivation was to replicate to some degree the addictiveness of Skyrim. And while they ultimately failed to give you that sort of explore whatever you want, do whatever you want experience, you could see what they were trying to go for. And much of the story was solid enough to make you forget about its shortcomings. So if anything, the Veilguard is the polar opposite. Story is dull and unfulfilling, but this exploration part is satisfying and takes BioWare's natural strengths when it comes to designing a compact and path-filled sandbox. But like I said before, this isn't what I play BioWare games for historically. So the Fate expert is a Mournwatch guy who is a senior necromancer and professor. And this is probably the first scene in this game where I was actually charmed by what was happening. Because let's face it, this kind of stuff is really cool to watch. But I also admit that necromancy and fantasy settings has always been something that I've been drawn to. And if I can admit that, then I have to admit that someone might be equally as charmed by a griffin, demonic wings popping out of an assassin, and so on. So there's an audience for these scenes and this style of writing, and while it's hard for me to set aside my criticism as a longtime fan of the series, I have to say that I'm not completely turned off by every little spat of dialogue or cutscene. I just feel like a lot of the same tropes are overused regardless of the setting and events. Anyways, this is Emmerich, who is kind and cordial. He's like a good Walt Disney, except instead of cartoons, he imbues fade spirits into corpses and reanimates them for manual labor. Actually, maybe he's more of a regular Walt Disney. Guess I should ask Emmerich how he feels about communism.
We've never met, well, in person, but I've been writing to you.
Belara, my dear girl, what a pleasure.
I'm Rook.
Okay, good. We redirected all dialogue back to the main character. Whew, that was close. He was almost more familiar with the person that he's been communicating with for however long through letters. So there's something wrong at the necropolis which the professor here resides over. You can't expect any less because simply meeting someone and saying, "Hey, world on fire, need help," doesn't really cut it. So we run through the necropolis fighting undead and opening doors, which is probably one of my favorite locations yet. I feel like I'm developing Stockholm Syndrome at this stage because I'm just vibing and having a good time with the game, accepting the dialogue as it comes and all that.
By seal and flame, who brought despair in our midst? Despair? Who brought it here? Venatori.
Okay, maybe not all the dialogue. There's a point here hammered into the player about how bad the Venatori are because they have slaves. And they don't treat those slaves very well, let me tell you. Emmerich kneels down to talk to one of them, claiming that there's no slavery in Navarra, the region that we're in. And I find that fascinating because the devs really wanted to make you feel like the breaker of chains, someone who stands against slavery at all costs. I mean, shit, the Venatori are using them, right? But you know who else uses slaves in historically every other Dragon Age game? The Tevinter Imperium, especially Minrathous. But we don't even mention that shit to Nev or Dorian when we encounter him.
Today's subject, slavery.
Interesting, huh? It's almost like you chose a region with very different ideals and laws, and instead of exploring these policies and having the player stand up to the regime, that shit is just swept under the rug. So we clear out the mean old Venatori and get the necropolis under control. Varric once again steps in to reveal the hint of another future boss, a pale, mad scientist lady. Yo, alright, now we're branching the fuck out. Creativity is pumping along full steam. Emmerich agrees to join us along with his lovable goofball skeleton servant named Manfred because it would actually kill a writer to come up with anything remotely serious in this game. I decided to head back to the Shadow Dragons for some upgrades at this stage before continuing on, and it is worth noting that quite a few key points of the city have changed. It's mostly around the Shadow Dragon base area, but I appreciate the effort put into how the whole region is presented. I can't buy anything from the Shadow Dragons anymore and instead have to go to the Black Emporium or the Crossroads for their items. Most of the quests have also shifted and changed to reflect the idea that you're now helping out all of the innocents whose lives have been affected by the Venatori seizing control, which on one hand is a nice detail, but on the other, any notion of being able to stand against the old Minrathous leadership's laws and ideas have evaporated before it could even manifest. It's just not the writer's prerogative to create any sort of moral ambiguity surrounding the practices of one of the shiftiest places in Thedas, because now it all belongs to the Venatori, which are evil. And something tells me that even if I had chosen to prevent this outcome, Minrathous would have just continued to be a fun little city of the ultra-rich ruling over the poor masses with no further substance or exploration into that idea. So let's get to our Dragon Hunter. As you imagine, this involves the Lords of Fortune, my guy's faction, and the final one that we haven't contacted yet.
The Kunari were on pretty good terms with Ravane, but that was before the Antam military broke away from the rest of the Kun.
Whoa, what in the fuck casual lore drop is that? So let me catch up those who don't know. The Kunari pretty much all follow the Kun. It's basically their religion, their governing body, their societal structuring, everything that you can think of in one. Those born into the Kun are assigned a role at a young age, not a birth name. Like, soldiers are simply all called soldier in the Kunari language. Those who break away from the Kun and try to live more freely are regarded as Talvashoth, and are more or less viewed as outcasts and/or traitors. I've covered this quite a bit in my previous videos, but I guess this is a refresher. So anyways, the Antam is the military body of the Kun. You know, all of the soldiers and shit. And they just broke off and went rogue from the rest of the Kun. This seems like very, very prevalent knowledge to offhandedly just whip out there in an unrelated conversation. But it would also explain their behavior in Treviso to a degree, I guess? I'll need more details that I'm sure we'll get here soon, but it's so bizarre that this is the way that I found this out. So we meet the final companion, Tosh. Kunari Lord of Fortune like me, stabs people with the blunt end of an axe, says cool guy lines like, "Don't get in my way."
Don't get in my way.
This one's gonna be an event. On the plus side, this is the first time that talking with someone and having them talk explicitly to my guy makes more sense. On the other hand, this would have been the case if I had chosen any other faction given how we meet. Our goal is to help Tosh to, I don't know, get into a cave, lure out a dragon, and allow the Lords of Fortune to loot it. Something along those lines.
Sure. I wear a lot of stuff. You don't get to tell me who I am.
Why is a dragon hunter interested in our job?
I'm not.
I thought you wanted us here to help you.
No.
Oh fuck, this is gonna be the one that drives me over the edge, I can tell. Yeah, Tosh talks like, as someone who was raised on the internet was prompted to write a character to sound badass, but they haven't conversed with real humans, so they don't really think of ways to integrate that badass persona into a medievalish fantasy setting in a way that comes off as actually cool. So Tosh just kind of says things that don't fit in with the general speech patterns of the Dragon Age universe, and we have to just accept that.
On time ahead. Be ready. They go hard.
We're trying to take down evil god monsters and their blighted dragons.
What? That can't be right. Dragons don't get blighted. They're smart enough to avoid that crap.
However it's happening, the gods are using the blight to force dragons to attack people.
That's messed up.
The entire dragon luring process has the writers wanting to make Tosh out to be a kind soul who doesn't just simply hunt dragons, but tries to get to know and understand the dragons who aren't overtly assholes. So in this case, this dragon is one that Tosh has built up a rapport with. The dragon knows that it gets dinner if it hears the horn blow and abandons its lair to eat the offering. That's right, not even the dragon is safe from the decay of the moral system being overhauled to include no gray areas. It's a nice dragon who understands that it gets dinner in exchange for leaving its lair that it protects all day. But there has to be a conflict, right? So here come the Antom who have been roaming around the region. Now I understand the Antom being here. They've given enough reasoning for it to make sense because they're simply just invading this region. But they're just this root evil now, copy and paste bad guys in a world that should have been so much more complex.
Mara Namra Benarie Bala! Atash Martarost! Asitarala! Kuto!
Yeah, that was the one. This is the scene that made me realize that I'm analyzing a game that I was never going to like. This shit is not made for me. I keep saying it's bad fanfiction because that's what it amounts to after all of the blocks of lore and world building that have been carefully stacked and assembled over nearly 2 decades of games. It isn't written to gel with that established storytelling, it's written to be cool and quirky and fun. They could give Tosh 1,000 reasons to have dragon breath. It doesn't make up for the serotonin receptors in my brain shriveling up and decaying into an irreparable state upon witnessing a scene so cringe that it permanently altered the course of this video. It doesn't matter. We free the dragon, Varric unveils the final boss, which is surprisingly a big bulky Kunari, so at least we got that out of all of this. We head back to the Lords of Fortune base, which is headed by Isabella from Dragon Age 2, which is a great inclusion, honestly. It's cool to see her continuing her escapades as someone who loves treasure. I just wish it happened before I was defeated by this game. So Tosh's mom comes over to dote on Tosh and basically force them to join us. Tosh goes from being this brooding, standoffish person who seems to want little to do with you to being friendly in the blink of an eye. Because interpersonal conflict is scary, not interesting. Everyone should be my friend immediately. I mean, this is a fantasy game, right? Speaking of, we meet with everyone back at the lighthouse to discuss our next move. This has Nev showing up and going, "Hey, you know that one time I was upset with you? That was silly and I've grown up from it immediately. Oh, Captain, my Captain." Thanks, Nev. I was very afraid that you might have spun off into a hateful, terrible, but interesting person, and I'm glad to see that instead of getting choices to guide you further into that hatred or away from it, I instead don't have to face any sort of hard issue involving your complex emotions. You fucking personification of a plain bagel. You know what? We might as well talk about companions since we have them all, right? So normally in every BioWare game that I've covered, I've taken the time to really analyze, understand, and weigh out all companion personalities, character development, personal stories, and so on. I'm talking from Knights of the Old Republic all the way to Andromeda. I've ranked them, given my reasoning for preferring one over the other, all that. I'm not going to do that here. This is going to be a lot more freeform and loose, because the Veilguard's companions are terrible. Every last one of them. Because they're all written nearly the exact same way. And I don't mean that they all have the same personality, like of course Harding is more confident and down to earth and focused on her tasks and so on. Bellara is quirky, more oblivious to romantic connotations, prudent with double-checking her lists but reckless when applying herself to various Fade technology. Lucanus is kind and quiet but fun and light-hearted. You get the point. And yet there's always this moment with every single companion where the writers go, hey, wouldn't it be funny if they made a light-hearted quip here regardless of the context or situation?
There are only 13 griffins alive in Thetis. That monster just took 12 of them. And if you can help get the other griffins back.
He likes the idea.
He's hoping you brought food. I'm a Grey Warden. Death's around every corner. Not that I don't enjoy punching it squarely in the face.
That's when I discovered I possess a great terror of dying.
That's an issue for a necromancer.
Interactions feel terrible, cliche, boring, and just like bad fanfiction.
Do you mostly cook Dalish foods? I haven't had a chance to try many.
Sometimes. Not a lot of options when you're out in the forest. But I've learned a lot of different cooking styles. Antivan, Rivani. Oh, I even learned how to make Tevinter Khachapuri.
Wait, real Khachapuri? The hollowed out bread? 3 kinds of cheese? I love Khachapuri. You should have an assistant. Someone to make sure it doesn't burn. See if it tastes right. That sort of thing.
Nev Gallus, helping me cook?
There are very, very rare points where I thoroughly enjoyed interacting with these people. The vast majority had me sighing, rolling my eyes, or just confused by what was being presented. Companions are all unanimously attracted to you no matter what, and have zero identity of their own despite the game trying to push this concept of them being also unique. It's hilarious to thumb through dev interviews rebuking the idea that the game's companions aren't player sexual, but they literally are. None of them go, oh yeah, sorry, I prefer men, or the like. They all just love you no matter your shape, identity, race, whatever. And all of them wholeheartedly accept one another with very, very rare spats of disapproval or conflict. Like you have Bellara, who constantly goes through Nev's shit because she's obsessed with her work as a detective. She treats her like a deity, which Nev politely warns against, but Bellara never improves in that regard. It's fine to write an annoying character, but I'm just sitting here thinking, man, how much more human would these people be if they just went, hey, Bellara, fucking stop, you creep. And then you'd have the option to rush to her defense and say that she's okay the way she is, or to help try to guide her in a direction that makes her less weird. But they all just tolerate and politely smile at her intrusive quirkiness.
This was with my things. It looks like your handwriting. I didn't read it. Well, a couple of words. I thought it might be one of mine. I don't even know how it got there.
It's those wisps. I need more wards.
Oh, I can help with that. Do you follow the chantry? The pendant. I noticed it's Andrastian.
And this trend of being afraid to write abrasive characters or reactions extends to every other companion. Like, okay, let's take the only companion that I genuinely had a positive reaction to immediately, Emmerich. I enjoyed him because I liked how he was a necromancer who broke away from the traditional yoke of what people think of when they imagine someone who works so closely with the undead. But that's just surface level value, and it never goes anywhere beyond that. You have 100 different ways that you could go with this, and you chose to make him just a polite and eager old guy who's fun to listen to. It's the path of least resistance and least creativity, because the other companions do occasionally comment on necromancy being widely regarded as strange and scary. So let's take that idea. Say that Emmerich is truly this happy-go-lucky death mage who loves what he does and doesn't understand the stigma surrounding his path. But the other companions repeatedly misunderstand him. They begin to isolate him, not wanting to go near him, giving him sideways glances or whispering behind his back. And it bothers him. You try to step in, but they keep going, and eventually he breaks and leaves the party. You can choose to agree with your companion's treatment, or you can go after him and hear about how he feels that he's been essentially bullied for his choices, for pursuing his happiness. And you have to choose how to navigate the issues raised by the other companions. Maybe Davrin in particular lost a loved one to an evil necromancer, and you have to carefully talk him down from leaving if you coax Emmerich back. Or maybe in another scenario, Emmerich is carefree and polite as he always is, but those rumors about necromancers prove to be truer than he initially lets on, and he does things that seem morally wrong or downright creepy. He spins into this character who is naive about how others perceive his actions, choosing to reanimate one of Nev's dead friends who died during the Minrathous attack. He uses their body in the hopes that it will make Nev happy, which understandably makes her sick to her stomach when the friend shows up in her chambers walking like a zombie. The whirlwind of emotions would be on the player to handle and process, to judge and wade through, but nothing like this happens. Emmerich is just a swell guy with no character flaws and just nicely wades to the necropolis, helping kind spirits to find peaceful afterlives. Everyone here is just how they are, and they all just happen to align and be these perfect companions with no real bite to their characters.
I assure you that performed with care, necromancy is no more harmful than any other magecraft.
There is a difference. Fire and ice spells kill people. They don't bring them back again.
What's so objectionable about a simple reanimation?
It's a waste of hard work.
There's only one scene that I saw where two companions genuinely clash, and it involves Tosh claiming that they're disgusted by necromancy and that they don't understand Emmerich, which is a great scene at first, but guess what? It's resolved immediately within the same scene.
I need one of these little needle things to dig some crap out of my armor. Death Mage won't give me one.
First, a bone threader is an extremely delicate instrument. Second, it's Emmerich, Tash. My name is Emmerich, not Death Mage, not Corpse Guy, not... I won't repeat the rest.
What? You are a Death Mage.
Why are all my attempts to converse with you met with scorn? What have I done to you, Tash?
You talk about corpses too much.
So what I'm hearing is Tash isn't into terrifying dark magic.
It's not all terrifying.
And Emmerich would appreciate not being bullied and called names.
Ugh. Fine.
I'd no idea necromancy upset you so deeply, Tash. Quite honestly, I didn't think you feared anything.
I don't. But I could have said it was bugging me.
Like, what the fuck? Everyone is happily friends and there's no bad feelings despite Tosh bullying the shit out of Emmerich because they don't understand him. Which is so fucking ironic, but we'll get to that. Gone are the imperfect, the emotionally complex, the fascinating backgrounds. Characters like Morrigan and Alistair, Varric and Isabella, Cassandra and the Iron Bull. And the funny part is that you can see how a lot of them are these pale shades of previous Dragon Age companions. Lucanus is a less interesting Zevran. Bellara is a stunted version of Sarah, or hell, Peebee from Andromeda. A stunted version of Peebee. I can't fucking believe I'm saying that.
Oh, God, damn it. Oh no!
Even the deeper moments where a companion opens up to you feels not good. And it isn't because of the voice actors, they're doing their damnedest with what they were given and acting their asses off. But okay, let's take Bellara. I didn't like her at first, and I would still say that I'm, I guess, neutral towards her. It's the best compliment I can muster. Her tragic backstory comes from her very first one-on-one quest with her. You go to perform some maintenance on some artifacts and she gets sad. You ask what's up and she tells you that her brother got sucked into the Fade when he was tinkering with an artifact. She feels like it's her fault because she triple-checked the thing and he still died because of it. Or probably died, I guess. Which is a fine backstory, but I barely know her at this stage. There hasn't been any bonding moments before this, she never mentions her brother to you before this, she doesn't allude to feeling insecure or upset about her work before this. And then it all just comes out in one giant trauma dump. And that's what the writers thought made for a good story. Hey, people love it when companions have sad backstories. Just do that over and over and do it immediately with no tact, lead up, or payoff. But the real issue is that this isn't just a ham-fisted way to kickstart a story of tragedy revolving around Bellara and her brother. We don't get a trail of breadcrumbs to follow, conversations where Bellara talks about or reminisces about her brother. She doesn't even mention him again. And then he just shows up in her next personal quest. She's like, "Oh hey, thought you were dead, bro." And he's like, "Nah, I got help from this thing."
I'm a Norris. They call me...
A forgotten one.
Yes, well done.
I'm not even gonna go into what this thing is because it honest to God does not matter. He was mentioned a few times throughout these games, but just think of him as a bad elven god. Anyways, Bellara's brother has now turned to the dark side and doesn't realize it, thinking that encasing people in Final Fantasy crystals is a way to help them.
Why do that to our people? We wanted to save them, not destroy them.
I mean, what is this dialogue? Is it just a line that someone heard in Star Wars and went, "Ah, perfect"? Because we have zero actual context for what this means beyond the fact that, I guess the Veil Jumpers are a helpful group? Like, I'm not cutting out any context here. I'm not sitting here and trying to fool the viewer. Oh man, actually, she goes into this big exposition about this and that and her brother, and I'm just fucking cutting it out. Like, you know everything that I knew up until this stage. It's just shit like this that makes it impossible to actually care about what's happening.
So Syrian's alive. Damn.
What the fuck do you mean, damn? She just told you that her brother's alive and your response is, "Fuck, I thought that bitch boy died." Like, it feels like the writers were just typing the first thing that came to mind. Like, one guy writes something, passes it to someone else, they write something that goes along with it, and this repeats until they have a story that looks fine on the surface but doesn't ever match in tone or context. And of course, none of this shit ends with Bellara's brother simply turning to misguided evil, as it turns out that he's being mind-controlled. You get through to him at the end because the power of words somehow makes him forget that he's being mind-controlled, at least long enough to disrupt a ritual and then die anyway. I don't know. He dies from getting tossed. Emmerich has the same sort of trauma dump going on at first with his initial companion quest, albeit his is a lot more concise. "Yeah, I was orphaned when a building collapsed and killed my parents, leaving me to basically be adopted by the Mournwatch." What's funny about this is that he then launches into this deeply emotional speech about how terrified he is of dying. The voice actor performs this speech fantastically, and you can hear the raw emotion in his voice. But it never leads to a better character. It never leads to Emmerich secretly working on a potion of immortality, something that might require a deeply unsettling and terrible substance to procure. Something that would crack Emmerich's cheery facade and reveal him to be a deeply flawed man with horribly misguided values. He just mentions how scared he is of dying, as if the simple idea of a necromancer being scared of death is so deeply profound that it stands on its own with no further exposition. Instead, the idea of being a morally stunted necromancer is relegated to the pale mad scientist lady who was hinted at before. Unsurprisingly, this is a former colleague of Emmerich's who we hear nothing about whatsoever until we actually see her, and repelling her is a task taken up by Emmerich. The irony here is that there's a scene following this where Emmerich explains the idea of lichdom. This is easily one of the most interesting aspects to any companion, as liches are typically evil undead sorcerer types in fantasy media. But here they're the good guys who watch over the necropolis and its spirits. After years of studying, Emmerich has been offered the opportunity to become a lich so that his fears of dying are quelled and he can continue his happy existence. To do this, he needs the peace of mind that comes with destroying his former colleague who botched her ascension and is now a half-lich instead of a full one. But here's the problem with all of this. His colleague sounds like the much more interesting person. Like, you have someone who naturally craves power, is morally stunted, and is an all-around genius who disregards the rituals that the Mournwatch perpetuates. Wouldn't this person be more interesting to connect with, to encourage or discourage, to clash and agree with over the course of the game? And that's exactly my point with all of this. Emmerich is pleasant to talk to and has interesting aspects to his occupation, but blends right into the demeanor of all of the other companions. So while your allies aren't all the same from a personality point of view, the way that they respond, bring up topics, or just engage in general are all extremely one note, which is actually strikingly similar to how your squad members behaved in Andromeda. But even that game outdoes companion writing by a large margin, and made walking through the ship interesting as they conversed without you being involved. The Veilguard tries to mimic that format, but just makes these people feel like they're trying to say something without having anything to say.
You call Manfred Fred?
Sure. He walked into my office. I said, Fred, can I call you Fred? He nodded. Seemed happy about it.
I got a letter from Maevaris. She asked how you were doing after your talk.
Good. Yeah. Tell her I'm good.
She's around if you want to talk more.
Maybe. Yeah.
Harding follows this same kind of uninteresting personality direction pretty immediately, despite having the most natural intrigue after being involved in the Inquisition. The most interesting thing that occurs with her is actually a great point for this game, exploring the origins and history of the dwarves. It's something that she pores over constantly after gaining her Titan magic capabilities. And she notes that the new latent knowledge that she gained from this magic clashes with or is absent from dwarven historical tomes. If you'll recall the Shapers in Origins, their job involved being the librarians for the dwarves. They managed this ever-shifting library of political and historical events, recording, changing, and erasing entries based off of voting and particular regime decisions. If the Shaperit voted or were forced to erase previous knowledge of Titans and their magic, then all of this stuff that's happening with Harding is not only possible within the scope of the universe, it's a feasible and interesting fragment of lost lore, piggybacking off of what happened in the Inquisition DLC. But the writers don't really hone in on that political intrigue any further. Instead, Harding is often given the exact same quirky personality traits as every other godforsaken companion in this game, because the people writing them would rather go for goofy, quirked-up millennial humor than substance.
See this rock? I'm gonna move it.
How funny would it be if she didn't move that rock?
Ugh. Awkward.
I thought we bullied this kind of writing out of developers at this point, but I guess not. I guess they went to BioWare. You remember how Cassandra was my favorite character in Inquisition? And it's a weird choice on the surface because of how cold and prickly she was at first. It takes forever to earn her trust and favor, to have her warm up to you. And when you do get close to her, she claims that she never thought she deserved love. It was a beautiful human character arc. This game does not have that. Harding was the one companion that I was banking on to create some kind of spark in my mind, someone who I was really hoping would push me to say, hey, they got something right. And she just immediately falls flat when you get one-on-one with her because these people can't write for shit. Your hair is pretty? What the fuck is—
Your hair is so bright in the sunlight. Sorry, it's just really pretty.
Oh, thanks.
Are you blushing?
No. I mean, yeah. You try moving rocks with your mind.
Who wrote this? This is my third one-on-one conversation with this woman. It's like a high schooler's idea of romantic development. It's all quirk and no substance.
Okay. Damn it, no, don't touch me!
Either these people were watching us and listening to the entire conversation, or they're laughing at the attempted assault unfolding right in front of them. To make matters worse, this poor writing extends beyond romance-oriented dialogue and affects the very thing that I was claiming could save a fragment of this game. As we venture further in to train Harding's Titan magic rock-lifting capabilities, she fires off a little phrase of wisdom about the earth and being one and all that kind of esoteric nonsense that you would expect from a sage. And instead of saying literally anything that makes this sudden outburst make sense, something like, oh, I read it in a historical text, or it's something an old mentor of mine once said, she goes, oh, was I babbling? Weird. Weird how I said that really particular thing just now for no reason. Instead of making anything interesting out of this, you have it so that she just bumbles her way through her fish out of water experience and eventually finds a big statue housing the consciousness of the dwarf from the Inquisition DLC. Again, I didn't actually review this, but I guess long story short, there's a dwarf who goes down to the bottom of the fucking deep, dark roads, dwarf roads, where the dwarves are, and she finds the Titans, or something like that. Look, I didn't play it. I just read synopsis. But basically she goes down, finds the Titans, and then gains their power much like fucking Harding did. And now she's a statue. That's all you really need to know here, because it doesn't fucking matter. If they did anything interesting with it, I would have gone into detail, would have gone and played it, but no, I don't think so. Anyways, she tells Harding that the dwarves were created from the Titans, and then claims that the Guardians here are mad about her powers being so strong. There's a lot more to this, involving a lost tribe of dwarves who had to adapt to the onslaught of Darkspawn however they could, and a giant sanctum of pure lyrium, because everything needs to be bigger and more visually impressive than ever in this game to make up for any actual substance. To punctuate this point, the dwarf who led us to the statue that they revere immediately dismisses how it speaks after claiming that we need to show it respect.
Mind yourself and show respect when you enter the sanctum.
No, wait! I have more questions!
Huh. She does that. Riddles, riddles, riddles. Oh, I'm a rock.
There's no conflict or risk, no looks of disgust from the other dwarves, or further exploration into these key fragments of lore in any sort of meaningful capacity. We just ride this train to its unsatisfying conclusion because this is an optional side quest and is treated as such. Why write anything with impact if players might not even experience it? The end result has Harding confronting the anger of the Titans, which is visually impressive and a highlight for the dev team overall. Basically, Harding realizes that her powers are out of control because she rejected her own feelings of anger for so long that when she became connected to the Titans, she did the same thing with their feelings of anger towards the elven gods. Oh yeah, I think I said this, or maybe I didn't, I don't know, but the Titans are mad about the gods because they were the ones who more or less killed them off. Anyways, Harding ignored their emotions, which leads to this confrontation where you wind up choosing to have her embrace her compassionate side to quell them, or embrace their anger as a part of her. I chose the latter because it doesn't fucking matter. It never comes into play. Like, she doesn't become an angrier person because of this. The wrath of the Titans never comes up, ever again. She never has any sort of issue with this. I don't quite understand this choice, it's just there to be a choice, I guess. I just wish that all of these pieces were assembled differently. You have great bones here to create something fascinating, but there's never any risk to who and how Harding is. She's this chipper dwarf with a can-do attitude at all times, and you introduce this idea that she's being partially possessed by some of the most angry and vengeful beings in this universe. And instead of exploring that more, maybe making it so that her personality is slowly being overwritten by her newfound link, and you now have to decide to either unlink her from that or watch her change as a person, instead you just have her confront her bad feelings and give her a hug. The end. Still the same person. The Disney ending to this whole saga. The only companions that are even remotely paced out a little better than the rest are Lucanus and Davrin, which did surprise me. Davrin initially works better because the writers gave him something to latch onto, a purpose beyond himself. His griffin is something that he cares for and tries to nurture like a child to raise, and he seems primarily concerned with making sure that it can take care of itself in the event of the warden's death. It doesn't quite make him a great character, or even a good character, but it at least makes listening to him tolerable, even if there are still those moments when the writers couldn't help but give him one of their patented, snappy and sarcastic responses. The issue is that if you don't give a shit about the mere existence of a mythical beast in a world of mythical beasts, then Davrin falls flat in no time because that's literally all he talks about for the vast majority of your conversations.
My job was to keep the griffins safe, not fix their dinner. He overeats and you'll find out how fun griffin puke is. Griffins see darkspawn and it's a fight to the death, like wolves hunting deer. Aerial cavalry. A full-grown griffin is a force of nature.
I'm starting to dream that I'm a griffin.
Every muscle in him, every talon, every feather, honed into a killing machine.
The real dream is getting him to take a nap.
Half lion, half eagle, with the instincts of both, eyes of an eagle, roar of a lion. But maybe the heart of a holla. I'm responsible for the future of every griffin alive.
Like, I get it, it's what he's hyper-fixated on, but you can write someone who's interesting beyond their link to a pet. It's like when somebody gets a girlfriend or a boyfriend for the first time and their entire personality becomes, hey, I'm in love. Yeah, I know, dude, but can we talk about something else? It just drags on and on and on with him, and it becomes tedious when you walk up to him for the 10th time and he's like, hey, you want to go out with my griffin? He's hungry. Fortunately, there is something else to Davrin, and that is that he's a Grey Warden, which, yeah, is old news 4 games in, but there's still something alluring to me about this concept of a faction that doesn't care about your past, that will take in the worst of the worst and put them through a life and death trial in order to combat the ultimate evil. And hearing Davrin summarize that is a soft spot for me because it reminds me of what this series was at one point. Hearing him talk about bandits and thieves being better fighters than farmers and florists, about how these scum of the earth types tend to gain true purpose and betterment through fighting Darkspawn, I don't know, it just made me pine for this game to do more stuff like this. I mean, it also made me think, how cool would it be for Davrin to have been a mass murderer before he turned to the Wardens and redeemed himself? But let's not get crazy. I was surprised enough with Blackwall's twist in Inquisition. I don't think we're getting anything remotely as interesting in this game. But still, this conversation was a breath of fresh air, and it really made me understand that I'm not just jaded with this entire game and am looking for its worst components to pick on. No, I'm definitely jaded with this entire fucking game, but I'm not actively looking for the worst parts. I'm still looking for good stuff. I'm really trying. And if for some reason the narrative shifted to be this masterpiece this far in, I would applaud it every step of the way. However, it does not. Davrin's journey winds up being about him bonding with his griffin, which entails quest after quest, conversation after conversation. Eventually you encounter the Gloomhowler again, which turns out to be a warden who was around during the 4th Blight. A pale elf lady, if you were wondering. If I've learned anything from this game, it's that white women are just the fucking worst. Anyways, she was forced to blight the griffins in order to end the blight, which left her spiteful and angry towards the Grey Wardens, which is again a good motivator for a villain, but it would be even better in an ally. Imagine hunting down the Gloomhowler, defeating it, and then it somehow turns into an elven woman through some magic or another. You can make it up, who cares? You keep her locked up for a bit and it eventually becomes clear that she's not that bad of a person. She joins you as an ally but still gets weird when griffins are brought up. Eventually she makes her move to destroy the Wardens, betraying your party. If you were good friends with her, she can be talked down. If not, you have to kill her. That's a fun story, I think. Instead, we have Davrin, whose entire personality can be condensed down into Griffin Daddy, and eventually talks with Rook about this Gloomhowler lady as if she were evil and chose to blight the griffins willingly. I don't get it. Why can't it at least be one of these things where we're like, kinda understand why she's pissed, but it doesn't mean that she should take it out on today's Wardens. And the reasoning behind this poor writing is something that plagues the rest of this game. People you fight are evil, and bad feelings should be avoided. It was never going to happen, but can you imagine the sheer potential for character growth from Davrin if his griffin dies here? The emotions that he would have to deal with, the grief and anger that he would have to get a lid on in order to continue? Why are these writers afraid of tragedy? Lucanus mirrors Davrin's introduction to his character in a lot of ways. His first quest isn't a journey of self-discovery, a trauma dump, a revelation where he exposes his entire psyche all at once. Instead, he shops in the markets. He picks up some apples for Nev, some fish for Balara, some spices for Harding, and then we go and meet his cousin at a cafe. Talk shop, track one of the vampire lady's movements, take the time to chat about coffee. It's just a well-paced scene, one that didn't give away too much but still developed Lucanus as a character. If you put this scene into a previous Dragon Age game, it would fit in as a middle-of-the-road normal scene that I would hardly mention. But here it looks like the fucking Citizen Kane of the Veilguard. And this tends to be par for the course with Lucanus' scenes, conversations, and quests, at least until the very end. His responses tend to be more measured, more realistic, but the people around him still respond with borderline baffling replies, and any more development of his character gets stonewalled. For example, in his second quest, he tells you that the leader of the Crows, his grandma, was killed. The body was recovered and cremated. Last I checked, she was simply kidnapped, but my guy doesn't ask anything about that. He just goes, "Oh my god, my condolences." We show up at the base for the funeral arrangements, and Lucanus begins grilling these guys about the details, which is a very normal thing to do. I mean, come on.
How? How did the Venatori get to her? When? Where? In the estate? In the city? How did they get past our people? What did they use? Poison? Blades? I need to know.
Cousin, stop. You can't dwell on this. It'll drive you mad.
Boys, enough of this. We have other things to discuss.
What the fuck are you talking about? Your leader died. How could the details not be important? And it's not just one guy responding this way, it's both of these people, and the conversation is agonizing because it never goes the way that I want it to. I want these guys to go, we should get to the bottom of this, figure out what happened, come up with a plan to strike back. Instead they're like, well that cousin's always acting weird when things get tough. We got a funeral to plan. The house is lucky to have you, field guide lady. It's just a frustrating conversation because as soon as the game presents a tiny sliver of intrigue, it dashes it away instantly with shit dialogue. Even the idea of Lucanus being possessed is soon brushed under the rug, a source of lighthearted banter rather than the treacherous thing that it used to be treated as.
I hope these two are paying attention.
Remember when someone being possessed was something that caused nearly everyone to look at said person with distrust and suspicion? Yeah, that's gone. Because it's more fun if everyone just goofs around with the idea of a spite demon inhabiting somebody's body instead. Not that it really matters. I mean, this demon of spite hardly ever does anything actually wrathful. I mean, occasionally, sure. But most of the time he just says something wacky for comedic effect. Of course, the whole "I'm possessed by a demon" thing does eventually come to a head when we track down the vampire lady that ran the prison. The quest itself is structured fine and has you taking on all of the mini-boss underlings before getting to her properly. When it's time to finish her off, she claims to have information about how the crows were so utterly bamboozled. But before she can talk, here comes the cousin who we've noticed has been acting strange for a very long time, who crushes her throat and kills her right as she clearly recognizes him as somebody else. This causes Spite to take over completely and try to kill the cousin, who uses blood magic to put the demon to sleep. Of course, the aftermath has us going, wow, that guy was acting weird. Like, why even have a story with plot twists when the plot twists can immediately be comprehended by anybody with room temperature IQ? At this stage, it feels less like the player is being treated like a moron and more like the characters are competing in intelligence golf. Eventually, Lucanus has Emmerich speak with the dead so that he can interrogate the woman that clearly knew his cousin, and that gives us enough evidence to go after the guy. Before that though, another rare moment of good shines through when Spite drags you into Lucanus' psyche. You explore his inner thoughts of turmoil, his issues of inferiority, his fears and worries. And for all intents and purposes, it is a good moment. But it would have been a great moment if there had been more engaging conversations with the assassin. I mean, sure, he'll tell you that he's ashamed of Spite, that he doesn't like losing control. He'll tell you that the kidnapping of his grandma was something that he didn't like, because, I mean, that much is obvious. But he never really tries to open up to you, and you never really get to know him in a more significant way. This whole romp through his inner emotions are the substitute for that, and it works about as good as you could hope for at this stage of the game. It's actually a prime example of showing and not telling, but it comes too late in the game to have as much impact. Maybe if this were a state that you occasionally stumbled into repeatedly, you encounter his feeling of not being good enough for his grandmother and then vanquish it and return to reality where you chat about the issue. Then you do that again for the next emotion until you finally get to the end. But that would actually require building up a character, which is not in this game's repertoire as seen by the third shade of Lucanus' emotions. It stops being about distinct and separate emotions like inferiority and fear and starts to blend all together into him not feeling like he's worth the effort, a surprisingly spot-on representation of how the writers approach these companions in a way. Because let's be honest, the demon of spite could have easily been a demon of envy or anguish or pride or whatever the fuck because it hardly ever does anything spiteful. It just wants complete control of Lucanus. And it completely gives up on that by the end of the game for some fucking reason. The end of this journey just has the two getting along better so that they can share a body equally. There's really no overwriting of Lucanus' personality like Justice did with Anders. It's just a funny little demon who pops out to say funny little things while sometimes giving Lucanus wings. Anyways, you chase down Lucanus' cousin, take out his Venatori soldiers, rescue the old woman, and Lucanus becomes the leader of the Crows.
Get up, Ilario.
Katarina, thank the Maker.
What am I supposed to do with this idiot? Too much to forgive. But he's still all I've got.
Lucanus is first Talon now. His decision stands.
A toast to the new First Talon.
To Lucanus!
Well, aside from a distinct lack of ambition, I suppose it's because I wasn't given much of a choice. The Crows bought me young. I was a bargain, too, or so I'm led to believe. To be completely honest, I was never given much of a choice regarding joining the Crows. They bought me on the slave market when I was a child. Well, here's the thing. I failed to kill you, so my life is forfeit. That's how it works. If you don't kill me, the Crows will. Even if I did kill you now, they might just kill me on principle for failing the first time.
Lucanus isn't quite the cause for the Antivan Crows being butchered as a faction, but he is a byproduct of it. I've said enough on the subject, but these entire final scenes really encompass just how terrible the Antivan Crows are now compared to how they were built up previously. But what about Nev? For all intents and purposes, in my playthrough, Nev should stand out as somebody who's interesting due to my choices, as someone who changes because I chose to abandon her hometown. But she stays pretty much the exact same character and has the same type of similar responses as every other companion, despite the game telling you that she's hardened now. Going back to before that, the first real spat of learning when it comes to who Nev is occurs when you go out with her to collect newspapers. It's part of her detective work, and you walking around with her is framed as a way for your guide to get to know her better. Which is a good call, right? I mean, Balara just drops everything on you immediately, and Harding falls flat on her face in the name of Quirk. So this is a much better idea in terms of pacing regarding getting to know somebody who was basically a stranger a week ago. And my guy starts asking her stuff like, hey, do you miss your home of Docktown, aka the slums of Minrathous? Or do you like working alone? And she goes, kind of, I guess, to both of those questions. And there is absolutely zero follow-up. It makes me feel like my guy is asking questions to be polite and not because he gives a shit. Because this is how these guys write dialogue now. Prompt into vague answer into no follow-up. This isn't how a normal conversation goes unless it's like I said, that my guy doesn't actually care, he's just being polite.
You've lived in Docktown your whole life.
Here's what we know.
Since I was born. Unless I'm out of the city for a job. Had a few apartments around town. The current one, it's not the lighthouse, but it's mine.
Wow, that's cool, Nev. I've never actually owned property. Where's your place at? How much would something like that run me if I were to settle down here? Where's the follow-up? The end result has Nev eventually telling you that she likes Minrathous despite the fact that it's a shady and corrupt city, and that she joined all of this to stop the gods from destroying it. Which is fine, I guess. I mean, hell, you could draw parallels to this and the first quest with Lucanus that I praised, right? You walk around, do some stuff, have a chat. But the difference here is that Lucanus was the show and Nev was the tell. Lucanus showed that he was a nice guy at his core, that he thought of others, that he went out of his way to take care of them. Nev tells you that she's a nice person and that she cares about others. The difference in impact is night and day. There's one side note that I have here involving Nev's intro quest that's completely unrelated to the companions but has to do with these newspapers. One of them says something like, hey, the big anti-slavery movement has made its way to Minrathous, huzzah! Which continues to paint the writing team as entirely inept compared to the team that wrote Inquisition over a decade ago, because there was this amazing point that Dorian brings up regarding slavery and how the Tevinter Imperium feels about it. How it's accepted and not really viewed as slavery the way that people in Ferelden view it. It was a heavily nuanced topic that felt rewarding to navigate and gutsy to include in your game's universe. Imagine finding yourself in this place of magic and mystery and suddenly being faced with the idea that not only is slavery normal, it's generally accepted. Imagine the different conflicts that you could make happen based on how your guy feels about that. But now all of that intrigue has been dashed away because it's apparently much more prudent to make the point that slavery is always bad. I can't wait until the devs take a stance about murder being wrong or the idea that winning the lottery is lucky. When the hardening does occur later down the line, there is this moment where Nev seems to be a little different. More cold, jaded, less reliant on you. It would have been a great and welcome addition to the game if she stayed that way, because there would be this whole conversation where she blames you, even if you had to choose one town or the other. There's nothing that you can do to fix it because she's giving into her grief and irrationally blaming someone who had to make an absurdly difficult choice. And maybe you continue to perpetuate that by treating her like shit whenever she comes around. Or maybe you continue to try to mend it and eventually you become friends, but never lovers. Nev never becomes something more, she just flirts with it. She claims that the city doesn't care about her efforts, that it hasn't changed and is still a shithole. But that train of thought evaporates immediately, and never blooms into this cold idea that the area that she grew up in and loves is a corrupt, terrible place that harbors slaves and keeps the poor down. There's a minimal amount of effort to separate the poor denizens of Docktown and the power-hungry rulers of Minrathous, and it never amounts to anything fulfilling. Nev doesn't ever expand on the idea that Docktown is fed up with the leadership, the people who have created this terrible environment. None of that complexity is ever presented in this game. The Venatori are to blame instead, despite the cancer always existing within the confines of the Tevinter Imperium's pursuit of knowledge and power. So Nev eventually just comes back and jokes around like she always has. She'll occasionally remember that she is upset about Minrathous, but she never takes it out on you like the average human would. And this complete turnaround in emotional state becomes even worse later on, but I'll get to that in a bit. For now, Nev hunts down her evil Blood Witch and has a Dragon Ball Z beam fight with her, which is the best character development that we could hope for. So let's conclude all of this with Tosh. While the rest of the companions were easier to talk about and linked to various instances and examples of how poorly different facets of this game were written, Tosh is in a category of their own because they feel very specifically like a self-insert OC in this game's universe. I already covered how Tosh talks in a manner that's very different from most people, factions, cultures, and so on.
What the crap is that? I'm not drunk, you're drunk.
And obviously this sticks out like a sore thumb. But it's so much more than the way that they talk. It feels like every little thing about Tosh is made up because it sounds cool. Like, here's a minor example. Your guy asks Tosh what it's like to breathe fire. Tosh explains that the Qunari have always been linked to dragons and that it feels like spitting to them. Because of this though, they can't taste food unless it's really spicy. Okay, fine. Then Tosh goes, well, I have a really good sense of smell to make up for it. But sense of smell is directly and intimately linked to sense of taste. It just feels like somebody made this up to sound interesting without further thinking about it. And it really crescendos with just how fast Tosh warms up to you when compared to other companions. Like you have this opportunity to have them run off and do something on their own and get into trouble, resulting in needing to be rescued by you. And of course they'd get all pissy with you for helping, but they eventually show some character growth and thank you for saving them. Yes, that is cliche as all hell and not even slightly original. But for the love of God, if there's something that this game's writing needs, it's to be a little bit more predictable so that its goofy moments can stick out as rarer and more interesting stints of writing. There isn't anything inherently wrong about being unoriginal as long as you can still make things entertaining. I mean, hell, Dragon Age started as medieval knights, demons, and magic, and it managed to be very entertaining regardless of dwarves being miners that live deep underground, and elves being hippies who live in the woods and used to have immense power. So instead of taking this confused, brooding, borderline rebellious Qunari and doing something predictable but endearing with them, Tosh begins joking around and having fun with you like your old friends almost instantaneously, and then initiates romance with you after a single one-on-one quest. And by romance, I mean that it's all sexual. Like, there's a very, very obvious direct translation of a fetish going on here with Tosh's character and mannerisms. And it really makes any chance of taking their personal issues seriously that much more difficult.
Are you trying to have sex with me?
Oh, wow. In my daydreams, this is where you lean over me and slap the wall.
Quick, think about us having sex.
The bigger issues that I have with Tasha's background and personal struggles almost all relate to how Tosh does their damnedest to single-handedly annihilate the intricate and deep lore of the Qunari and how they've functioned as a faction up until now. If it hasn't been obvious throughout this video and all of my other ones, the Qunari are my favorite part of the Dragon Age universe. I love their concept and how they function, or I guess used to. And I've had my issues with the direction that they've taken since Talos and Dragon Age 2. Actually, now that I've said that, I feel like the exact same team who wrote all of that DLC's shortcomings were promoted for this game. But whatever, I'm not even gonna get into that. Let's start with what Tosh is, an Adari. This was something that was introduced in this game with zero mention previously, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with coming up with new ideas in new games. But you would at least hope to have a vague whisper of fire-breathing Qunari before this. I guess they took the idea that the Iron Bull brought up in Inquisition about the Qunari being linked to dragons, so I guess that's the link. Either way, you have now introduced the idea of a very rare and very powerful form of Qunari, one that further pushes into that subtle link to dragons that the Iron Bull mentions previously. How do they fit into the Qun? Well, they would become berserker types that have been assigned that role at a young age. Cool. So you're telling me that Tasha's mom somehow pulled the wool over the eyes of the Qun and escaped with a fire-breathing baby with next to no issue. She just walked out. I would absolutely love if the blanks were filled in here and Tasha's mom hobbled out with one arm, one eye, and a prosthetic leg, basically showing that Tasha's existence was so important to the Qun that she had to pay a blood price just to get her and her baby out alive. But no, she just went, "Oh fuck, baby breathe fire, time to scoop up and leave." There's not even an afterthought spared for how something as powerful as a fire-breathing Qunari could become a very well-guarded secret of a society that historically locks down their people. Because it's all about making someone's OC special while trampling over a previously scary faction's entire image. This applies not only to Tosh themselves, but even to Tosh's friend, who strays from the gruff, powerful image of the Qunari and sits here quivering about how the Antam were so mean that he ran away. It's fucking terrible. You can have someone who breaks away from the Qun with these sentiments, sure, but holy fuck, why would I ever want to talk to them? The Iron Bull was a great example of someone who was eccentric within the Qun, but even he had his reasons for being so as a Ben Hasrath. And that's what I like to see. If you want to make somebody be different, don't stick them into the historically most confining race in the entire game series without at least being able to write up some good reasons for their differences. Make these guys humans, elves, dwarves, or even of new fucking race. I mean, why not? Why do these people who are stuck in here with the point of being different not have accompanying lore and dialogue that make them make sense within the confines of the Qunari?
Shathan said to eat the fruit before it spoils.
I like the cookies better.
Everyone likes the cookies better.
But the much bigger issue is hard to talk about because it brings in a very delicate topic into this game in a way that feels forced. Obviously, I've been referring to Tosh as they, them. It's their preferred pronouns, which they figure out in a manner of 3 or 4 direct interactions with them. I'll say this now because, well fuck, I never thought I would need to, but here we are. I don't care what people refer to themselves as. Let them be happy. Now, let's talk about what this journey of self-discovery does to this game and how it's presented. I've got 2 major issues. As you might imagine, one of these issues directly stems from Tosh being a Qunari but not adhering to previously established Qunari lore. This problem would not exist if they were literally any other race. Historically, there are very defined gender roles under the Qun. Women do the women work, men do the men work, nurses or soldiers, that kind of thing. This is what Sten brings up in Origins, and the Iron Bull addresses this idea much more directly in Inquisition, when he claims that if a woman can prove herself worthy of a soldier, then she can be one under the Qun. He also brought a trans man into the fold within his ranks, and treated him the way that he wanted to be treated, giving him the role that he wanted to have. For some reason, that's not even remotely brought up, despite my guy going, well, only men can be soldiers under the Qun. It feels placating, as if bringing up the idea that the Iron Bull addresses might be a hitch in the point that they're trying to get at, when it really could have been brought up and talked about as a supplementary point to how Tosh feels. As in, hey, well you could have been treated like a man if you proved yourself, and them responding with, well, I don't know if I want to be treated like a man either. But it's not even remotely touched on, which again makes this whole thing feel less about ensuring that the established lore is respected and more of a hostile takeover of the lore in service of an issue near to the writers. Honestly, at this stage, I can't tell if this is an issue near to the writers or if they were forced to include it, whether it made sense within the context of this universe or not. Because instead of working this idea into the game in a way that makes sense for everyone, that feels like the writing team truly cares, Tosh instead continues to be a striking counterexample to Qunari culture, and yet never winds up taking the time to figure out that the faction that they were born into is never going to accept them. Instead, Tosh continues to yell, swear, and grumble in the Qunari tongue because it's cool to speak in other languages when you're mad.
They're the ones who've been capturing dragons and blighting them, turning them over to Gildanane in exchange for power. Hisra Marluk Voshbatarin Rock!
But the second issue is just how terribly implemented this entire journey of self-discovery is. Would I make this kind of thing a focal point in a story that I'm writing? No, but I understand that the topic is very near to many people's hearts. I also don't seek out romance films, but can appreciate a good one when it's well written. So okay, you've decided to write this in as a key point to Tosh's character arc. How do you approach it? Well, you have them tracking a dragon, and when they get to its empty den, they freak the fuck out and start lamenting over the fact that it's too late and the Antam have captured it for the goal of blighting it and transforming it. The Antam do this with very specific Qunari ropes, which lie on the ground. Do you see all of the symbolism? The idea of a creature being bound and transformed into something that it doesn't want to be is how Tosh feels about themselves. Okay, not a bad start. Well then Tosh goes, "Oh my god, they're gonna transform the dragon into something it doesn't want to be. It's just like me, for real. Look at these ropes on my body. My mom made me wear them for some reason, and they are literally binding me to being a woman, something I don't want." Dude, if you're writing a story that shares problems that a specific demographic faces, then they're going to understand the symbolism without you hammering it into their heads. But it gets worse, as you might imagine, because this entire scene that's supposed to be about Tosh figuring out what they want to be has you needing to commit right then and there to being involved romantically with them or not. You're watching somebody have a mental breakdown about their identity and the game goes, "Alright, so you marrying them or what?" It's just a mess. And then of course you have the entire scene after all of this where Emmerich and Tosh are bickering. This stems from Tosh coming into Emmerich's space, calling him names, demanding his delicate tools so that they could scoop the gristle out of their armor, and then getting mad when he responds negatively. Like I said before, this treatment is because Tosh doesn't understand Emmerich's occupation and interests. They don't understand who he is. So the response is to bully him. This would actually be a fantastic learning opportunity where your guy goes, Tosh, how would you feel if somebody bullied you for who you are? But this idea is never even remotely hinted at despite this sort of thing practically writing itself.
I am changed, and I would never cause you distress by staying where I'm no longer welcomed.
You're no weirder than you were before.
Even more irony pops up later when Tosh and Harding are talking about their powers. Your guy views both of their respective powers to breathe fire and control stone as magic. Tosh insists that it's just part of who they are and that people have to accept that part of them. But then they belittle Emmerich for who he is. It's absurdly dense in the worst way and doesn't really help the player to connect to and understand Tosh's feelings.
So, I'm non-binary.
There's no grace, no tact, no regard for the idea that this is an established fantasy world. The term non-binary is relatively new in our real-world culture when applied the way that it is. Could a society in a fantasy video game have come up with the same term? I mean, yeah, sure, of course, it's fiction. But why stop there? Tal Vashoth could have just been called Redcoats. The Darkspawn could be Hell Demons. Illuvians could have been called Portal Mirrors.
I prefer the company of men.
Yeah, so I'm gay. Actually, I'm what the community refers to as a power bottom. It's a term that I heard in Orlais. Like, there's no respect for the setting of the game, no romanticism for this very human idea of feeling as if you do not belong in one of two groups. The idea of people existing outside of two genders has been a part of many cultures throughout history, and a lot of terms have been coined to help define them. But you know what the worst part is? The Iron Bowl tells you that a Qunari term exists for people who do not belong to their biological gender role, the Acunathlock. And this isn't a progressive and happy term for trans people. The reality is that the Qunari have always been the most ironclad, least understanding group in the Dragon Age universe. If you're a biological woman but you're really fucking good at fighting, the Qun are liable to send a group of soldiers to your front door and demand that you fight as an Akunathlok soldier within the Ontom. It's not a pride-related term, it's a role that's assigned to a person just like every other role in Qunari society. And if you disagree with your role, then you're re-educated via torture. But it goes further than that. Sex is something that is meted out also, as in the Qun has mandated brothels where sex is supplied by the government. Love isn't really a thing. Shopkeepers don't fall in love with soldiers. Instead, the Qun selectively breeds its people to create specific types of Qunari within its society. Most soldiers are born soldiers because the parents were chosen as the perfect stock to create a soldier. The Akunathlok are rare mistakes that slip through the cracks. There's a purpose to all of this. A very inhuman and detached one, but one that makes sense to the Qun. If you look back at instances of Qunari in the previous games, there are these moments where one or many of them lose their shit. Sten loses his sword in Origins and then blacks out and wakes up after having killed an innocent family. And Dragon Age 2 has an entire act where the Qunari in Kirkwall, which have been away from their homes for years, go nuts and start razing the city to the ground. At their core, Qunari are an animalistic, barbaric, dragon-esque people that have a very high temper. The Qun keeps them bound, ties them to a purpose, and takes care of their base needs. They don't need to think, they just need to act. Do you understand the building blocks here that have been completely ignored when Tosh says the term non-binary? Do you see the sheer potential for Tosh to be written as a likable, agreeable character with a lot of heart and soul, someone who was forced into the role of a man or a woman when they didn't feel like either? Someone who broke free and managed to stand against this absolute totalitarian power who was initially assigned a role that they never thought that they could escape. Someone who was born to be an Adari berserker but managed to escape with the help of a sympathetic priestess who took on the role of her mother at the cost of great injury to her body? All of these pieces have been here for years and years, and instead of being bold and expanding on them by inserting someone who would struggle within this brutal system, you instead dance around all of these amazingly terrible facets of this culture and create the most bland story that you possibly can. The very modern term of non-binary isn't the cause, it's the symptom of weak, spineless writing in a game that feels like a high school composition assignment. I'd have no issue with the term non-binary being a thing in something like Mass Effect, a series that stems off of humankind exploring the stars after being on Earth. It's just lazy, uninspired, and continues to point towards this idea that the writers just did not give a shit about the series lore. Then again, maybe I should have realized all of this when you have Lucanus running around spitting out random Spanish words in his Italian-inspired city for some reason. Those Latin cultures are all the same, I guess. Tasha's questline has them discovering their identity, trying to get their mom to accept it, and then having their mom get kidnapped by the Qunari known as the Dragon King.
Still a stupid name. Dragons don't have kings, they have queens.
And this is the crowning jewel of ineptitude from the writers. Besides all of the other examples that I've listed and the avenues that the writers ignored when producing a story about a non-binary person that hails from the harshest culture in the franchise, this last bit of dialogue prominently shows off just how stupidly Tasha's arc was written. Because the irony here is that somebody who rejects the idea that they must be defined by one of two genders is now scoffing at the idea that someone is calling themselves the King of Dragons and instead should be the Queen of Dragons. All dragons are female, so the person claiming to rule them must also be, right? Congratulations, you fucking moron, you just did the same thing that you've been giving your mother flack for this entire time. And nobody ever calls them out for it. At the end of the day, Tosh is just a grating, unlikable teenager at worst, and absolutely boring and unrelatable at best. The biggest issue with Tasha's journey isn't that they're non-binary. It's that their story doesn't feel like it belongs. Because instead of taking these human emotions and established lore and expanding on them in a deep and profound story that anyone can relate to, you're inserting it like it was an HR requirement to do so. It doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help those who otherwise wouldn't understand the viewpoint of Tosh, and it doesn't help those who struggle with being accepted for who they are.
Are there non-binary crows?
Sure, lots of them.
Do they still get capes?
Of course. Why wouldn't they get capes?
I don't know. People do stupid gender stuff. Only men can wear this, only women wear that.
Not in Antiva. The only rule is that you must have style.
Good.
The best thing that comes from the companion conversations is honestly just learning how the new factions work and what they stand for. Emmerich will fill you in on the Mornwatch and how they police necromancy to make sure that it isn't misused, while also ensuring that bad shit doesn't run loose from the Fade if they can. Tosh banters with your guy about how the Lords of Fortune are Robin Hood types and not just vault hunters, which kind of clashes with Isabella's character, but maybe she's grown in the many years since her adventures in Kirkwall. It's not a big stretch regardless. Valara shows you how the Veil Jumpers not only study new artifacts, but ensure that the various barriers and the like are working. It's all interesting enough to keep me listening, which is most assuredly a compliment for this game. Beyond these additions though, dialogue almost always prefers quirk over substance, with very rare moments where I go, huh, that's cool. The first example of a few that pops into mind is when Valara describes the scent of powerful magic as having a tin scent, and that simple mention of it had me imagining what a giant lightning spell might smell like. It's rare, but quips like these do occur occasionally and tend to make me wish for more like them. There is one last good thing that comes from all of this, and it's very specifically one of Emmerich's quests, but not because it's masterfully written or chock full of intriguing dialogue. The House of the Dead quest has you tracking down the aforementioned evil necromancer who's holed up in an old abandoned mansion. This entire level is stunningly detailed, a visual feast paired with absolutely fantastic exploration around this manor. There are parallels between it and FromSoft games as far as design goes, which is something that I was not going to mention until I stumbled across a skeleton with a note that reads "Treasure, try down." There's also a Fade section that wades into inspiration from the Hermaeus Mora segment of Skyrim's Dragonborn DLC, which is also really damn cool. I'm completely fine with devs drawing from those games, especially when the outcome is as well put together as this. But it really does point out something that I don't think I had fully grasped until now. Usually when I think of a dev team, I think of a team of people all working together to ensure that a game's visuals, animations, level design, environments, sound effects, music, and story all mesh together flawlessly. I've hammered this game into the ground because of the story, and it's made me naturally think that the whole team might have been disinterested or forced to do certain things. But there really was a raw passion behind a lot of development of the Veilguard, and I can feel it extraordinarily well when exploring areas like these. It's hard to separate the departments of a dev team instead of just stringing up the entire group as a whole, but a lot of this game did go right. They just aren't the parts that I care most about. All in all, your companions are forgettable, annoying at times, and never bring enough intrigue to the table to actually make you care about them. Every time you even remotely start to, they say something quirky to keep any connection from the player at bay. And nothing in these stories are actually compelling because the writers never take the time to make them compelling. Balara's brother is introduced as a concept and never talked about again until you see him. Nev's detective chase after a bad guy that she's encountered before has you repeatedly telling you that she cares about Docktown, but no nuance is ever brought to the table. Tasha's mother dies after she's been an asshole to her child for the entire game, and it's supposed to make you feel bad. Harding goes through her magic journey about embracing her anger, but literally never shows any out-of-control anger until you get to the very end of it. Lucanus is betrayed by his cousin, but that twist was obvious from the beginning and the impact is non-existent. Emmerich's journey is probably the most well-rounded, but still feels too clean when you compare him to his colleague and realize that you're just helping somebody accept what it means to be a lich. Davrin has every opportunity to succumb to some sort of tragedy, but just lucks out at every step of the way. It's laughable to see interviews where players were told that the entire point of this game hinged on forming connections and bonding with your companions. Like it was the selling point to the Veilguard, and the supposed reason why the title was renamed from Dreadwolf. But the entire cast feels too clean and sterile, something that seems to have crept from the character creation menus and seeped into the rest of the game. There's no soul here, no genuine connection. It just feels like a team that hates what Dragon Age used to be was brought up and given free rein to write a story as they see fit. Getting back to the main story, our objectives split here between meeting with Morrigan or the Warden couple from earlier. The latter are researching the Blight to see if it truly is different from before, and after nabbing some supplies, they confirm that it is. The first warden shows up again to go, Now, I know that everything is pointing towards this blight being more potent and unpredictable, but I'm stubborn. My character is to be stubborn. And that's about as far as we get there. Meeting with Morrigan has her bringing your Inquisitor from the previous game into the mix, which honestly feels like I'm meeting an impersonator of a famous person. Like he just barely resembles what my guy looked like, and it kinda pisses me off. As you can imagine, he recaps what he did for Southern Thedas and who he worked with, and won't be helping to fight the gods directly because he has to focus on the South. I kind of wish he was only mentioned here and not included like this. Honestly, I would have been more interested in meeting my warden from Origins after all of these years. But that probably would have irritated me too, since all of this feels like, I guess, fan service in a way. I don't know how else to describe it, it just feels like he's being included as a cheap way to excite me. Like the Inquisitor and Morrigan mentioned that these gods deployed a massive army of new Darkspawn variants to overrun Southern Thedas. They claim that the demons have ripped through Orlais, destroyed Denerim, and places like Kirkwall are barely holding out. These are all places from the previous games, and they feel like buzzwords to excite you. And they do to a degree, right? I know what these places look like naturally just from hearing their names. I remember where everything is in Denerim from Origins. How to get to the Pearl, the brothel where Isabella can teach you the duelist specialization. I remember many of the streets and side roads in Kirkwall. I remember the pristine and beautiful buildings of Orlais and Inquisition. And now they're all brought up in a string of sentences basically telling you that they are all destroyed. Again, it's telling me things and not showing them, and despite all of my efforts to prevent the future where Orlais is destroyed by the Darkspawn under Corypheus' assault, the city has apparently been destroyed regardless. It's just frustrating to hear without seeing it happen in some kind of brief cutscene. But hey, that would take a lot of work, so fuck it, here's the Inquisitor to tell you that all of the shit that you came to know and love from previous entries is completely dicked up now. Regardless, Morrigan continues to play the mascot as she claims that the Inquisitor has something neat for you, a statue of a wolf, no doubt related to Solus. It just sucks to see this woman who has historically done what she wants to do for her own ends be reduced to a cheerleader and servant for you and whoever else is actually important in this universe. When you make it back to the lighthouse, Davrin tells you that the Grey Wardens have been called back to their headquarters to mount an attack on the Darkspawn army, which seems to be moving about with an archdemon at the helm. So before leaving to figure that out, we need to talk to Solus. The conversation this time is actually pretty interesting, a fleeting moment in this game that is hard to cherish just because of all of its shortcomings. It's comprised of a back and forth between Rook and the Dreadwolf, one which has the Elven God musing on his past struggles to convince others to fight, much like you're struggling with getting the leader of the Wardens to listen now. He reveals that archdemons are simply high dragons who are enslaved to the Elven gods. They're basically JoJo stands for those who are gay enough to have watched JoJo, myself included. And as long as these archdemons live, then Elgernon and Gillenane are functionally immortal. So we head off to Weishaupt, which has a small, a 6-year-old child running around and being completely fine with death surrounding her because she's a brave little girl who leads us through this battlefield. Is it feasible? Yeah, sure, she could just be brave. But why write it? What's the point? Whatever, at least we get treated to some really cool visuals. I mean, come on, seeing this bitch come down like Zeus is just, that's fucking awesome. Something went right in the art department with this game, that's for sure.
A dragon! Gillenane brought a bloody dragon!
Alright, never mind, fun's over. So we head to the center of this maze and watch Davrin try to tickle an ogre for a while realizing that the only thing that companions are good for in this game are healing you while you do all of the work. Then we march into the war room and punch Captain Bald straight in the head. The other wardens hear me out because warden couple from earlier tells them to not attack the guy who literally just knocked out their leader. Now mind you, Rook has no fucking plan either. He just gives the first warden CTE and then goes, "Alright, so what's up guys, what do you have around here?" To which one of them goes, "Well, we have a trap that was built 900 years ago that was specifically made to capture archdemons, but I don't know." Rook, with all of his 20 charisma and 1 intelligence, goes, "Oh yeah, that's perfect, let's use that." A man of action is what he is. So we run and fight through set piece after set piece. You know, dragon attack, kill wardens, but not us. Turret section where we wait for Ogre to reset so we can shoot again. Bell tower collapse when we get to it, big tentacle come up, little girl save us, all your standard stuff. The entire way we get about 5 different variations of a conversation that recaps what we already know. That's not a dragon, it's an archdemon. We can't kill it without trapping it. We can't kill Gillenane without killing the archdemon. Just to make sure that everyone remembers throughout this 20-minute sprint. We make it to where the trap is, some light to medium giggles are shared, and the little girl is returned to her dad.
Hope she wasn't too much trouble.
See, if the dad died and the girl had to be adopted by the Veilguard, then there's a point to her existence. Right now, it's just a cheap feel-good moment that doesn't make any difference to the plot beyond me wondering why this little girl is completely okay with all of this. Guess she's just built different.
Once this is over, there's an old Illuvian here that could be our escape.
Ah yeah, everyone knows about the Illuvians, what they do and how they function now. Definitely not ancient elven magic that was only very recently kept a complete secret by the Dalish, so much so that Corypheus was hunting for very specific locations where one might be housed. Now everyone has them everywhere and knows everything about them. Maybe Morrigan visited city after city and told all of the leadership that she could find about them for this past decade. As we get closer to the trap, Davrin reveals that he's ready to sacrifice himself in order to kill the archdemon. I'm honestly surprised that the writers remembered that that was a requirement.
Davrin, we've had our differences, but you have my utmost respect for making this sacrifice.
What fucking differences? I've literally never seen or heard these two argue about anything whatsoever. It doesn't matter. As much as I would love for this game to kill Davrin off right now, it won't happen. It'll be, shit, I would say one of the 2 warden lovers because that's sad, but I bet it's the first warden who shows up all pissed off and proves that he's still a good guy despite being short-sighted. So we trap the archdemon by hoping that it lands on a very particular small square, thus setting off the trap. What a terrible device. But it works, and everyone claps and cheers. Yeah, I guess these guys just happened to get done killing off their respective darkspawn and were watching us do this.
Stand down, Warden.
Hey, there he is. But yeah, no, Gillenane pops out and rips his fucking spleen out, so that's actually cool. I would have loved to see that happen to Davrin. Might have made for an actual sad moment if done right. Then again, I don't care about him, so it wouldn't have, but you know, whatever. It doesn't matter, sadness is bad. So Gillenane transforms her archdemon into a strange serpentine monstrosity, which I actually don't have an issue with. I want to make it clear that I don't mind transforming or adding to lore if it does make sense, and in this case, they've made it clear that these guys are the creators of the Blight and should be able to do shit like this. So cool, no problem. What follows is the actual problem, as we've now been told that this Hydra-like creature is the real archdemon. With the first warden out of the picture, it falls to Davrin to kill this thing. And he does, but he doesn't die. What a twist. Like, why even bring up the idea that killing an archdemon will kill the warden too? You're halfway through trampling all of the other established lore, why pause for this bit of trivia now just to literally trample it also? Lucanus animes his way over to Big Gil and then slices her with Solus's dagger, which only pisses her off. So we retreat and meet at the base, which has Lucanus and Davrin going at each other for the end result turning out so poorly.
Okay, hold on. Now we're getting...
And you, Warden? What about the blight that runs through your veins? The same blight that Gillenane commands so effortlessly.
Just a moment, please.
Enough.
Is he gonna say something, or? So the end result of this shit show has the group coming to the conclusion that they couldn't kill an elven god because they have a lot on their minds. Like, I swear to God, they just start listing their problems and worries. Yeah, I wanted to kill God, but you know, I found this rare artifact and, well shit, I was thinking about that the entire time. Maybe you guys just suck, you ever consider that? So yeah, the objective is now to go talk to all of these people and listen to their concerns and help ease their minds. I know I've talked about how terrible the companions are in this game ad nauseum at this stage, but you have to understand it was rare for the previous games to force you into journeying down somebody's personal concerns before you could proceed. They all had them, of course, Liliana and her confrontation of her ex-mentor and lover, Meryl and her magic mirror quest. Vivienne had her mission to save her lover, and these were all pretty much optional beyond rare moments where personal journeys tied directly into the main quest line. They were only there for you if you felt the desire to explore them. It's a sign of good writing because the content is there for those who are invested enough in these characters to want to go through with these quests. And if you choose not to, then fine, they just won't be as warm towards you, or someone like Zevran will straight up betray you and leave. But this new style of writing seems to miss that memo, instead going, oh yeah, people love companions, make their personal stories a requirement to finish the game. So Lucanus is just pissed that he fucked up his shot at Gillenane. Sure, fine. Nev's issues are introduced in the best way possible through banter about how terrible she is at making coffee.
Oh no. Give Lucanus credit. It's terrible.
You need a stronger word for terrible.
So what's the coffee for?
What isn't it for? The Venatori used the dragon attack for a power grab. Now they...
You've taken the route of making appeasing your companions a requirement for this game. Why are you making a joke out of it? How am I supposed to take them seriously when they go, you know why this coffee is terrible? Because my city is in trouble. So yeah, I guess we need to help Minrathous out so that Nev is more focused. Thankfully, she tells us that her contacts hate slavery, so they're definitely not bad guys, thank God. Davern, on the other hand, is mad that he didn't die. Me too, buddy. Me too. But here's the fun part. I have no fucking idea what this conversation is about, because Davern doesn't go, hey, I planned on dying there and serving a purpose. I spent every waking moment ready to die and be at peace because I have immense depression. Or, the calling that courses through my veins and causes me to have nightmares of Darkspawn are literally driving me crazy and I was finally ready to end it all. Instead, he just goes, ah, fuck, I didn't die. That sucks. Like, this conversation doesn't have any sort of baseline emotional issue with Davrin. It just dances around them. Did he have depression? I don't know. Maybe he did. Does he have survivor's guilt? Potentially. But hey, let's not talk about that yucky stuff. Let's make a joke about being a truffle hunter.
A Grey Warden kills an Archdemon, they're supposed to die.
You'll raise a son to create a world where the light outshines the darkness.
Yeah? Well, let me tell you. That will require a lot more gingerwort truffles.
I got depression.
Anyways, we talked to Solus and he's like, yeah, just piss them off and they'll come to you. Right on, glad we're on the right track. So we go back to Poor Town and learn about some crime syndicate leader being kidnapped by the Venatori. I know what you're thinking, but crime is bad. Wrong. Crime is bad when it hurts innocents, but these guys are good guy crime guys. You know, there's a reality where this game is a well-written addition to the series and I launch into a tangent about who these guys really are, what they stand for, how they mingle with the other groups of the city, and so on. But in this script, they're just good guys who do crime. So yeah, we find the leader, he's being possessed by a blood mage, we stop the possession, and Docktown is... I don't know, I guess it's the same as it's always been. But here's the kicker. Doing all of this allows you to romance Nev again. Like, the game tells you that it depends on your previous choices, but I think unless you're going out of your way to call her slurs or whatever, you're good to strike up romance again. So there really are no consequences at this stage. I don't like feeling bad, and the devs made it their top priority to ensure that that is not the case, thank God. I mean, imagine if this were some crazy string of side quests that I could miss out on. That would be nuts. Thankfully, it's a main quest, making it impossible to miss the reignition of this romance string. Whew. Next up, we're required to go hunt down Davrin's Gloomhowler. We don't succeed at that since there's a very distinct pattern to these companion-oriented quests. Meet with them once, do a small quest, confront their big bad evil guy, and then finally kill it on a separate quest. Davrin's is mandatory, and we've already met with the thing when it took the Griffins, but we're still not at the kill stage. Varric says that it will take a miracle to save the Griffins, but that was never not going to happen. After this, we fucked around enough for the Treviso dragon to show up again, this time in the Miyazaki swamp.
Wise Haupt left people terrified. No one signed up to fight gods.
No, of course not. The Wardens signed up to fight malicious, terrifying dragons that cause hundreds of thousands of monstrosities to run rampant across the lands. Fighting elven gods is scarier than that, I completely understand. I don't know why I'm commenting on this game's dialogue anymore. It feels like it's been written by AI that has been fed the script of every major Hollywood action blockbuster of the last 2 decades. So we go to fight the dragon, and either my gear is good or I'm somehow over-leveled because this thing does go down almost instantly. Gillenane shows up to bring in the other dragon, and then we gotta fight 2 dragons, shockingly enough. The crows show up and go, "Huh, anyone order a ballista?" Everyone cheers and we kill both dragons. The game tells me that the crows are here because I helped them, something I was painfully unaware of until now. Gillenane goes, "Well, shit, I'm just gonna reanimate them again. It's what I do." And Rook responds by going, "Huh, anyone order a ballista?" The elven god gets taken out by a projectile weapon, reminding me of a particular Game of Thrones Season 8 scene, which definitely tracks given the parallels between this game's writing and the later seasons of that show. Before we can kill Gil though, Elgranon shows up and freezes everyone with time magic or some shit. The two look at each other and go, "Alright, so we've got shit to do in the forest now. The forest. Don't come to the forest. No time to kill you people who just almost killed one of us. We gotta go to the forest. Bye." You know, standard great writing all around as we've come to expect and enjoy. From here, the Venatori show up and kidnap some Veil Jumpers in the forest, so we disguise ourselves to blend into their ranks.
Make sure you split up. You don't want to draw attention.
Nev Gallus.
This has transcended beyond bad fanfiction and has now hit maximum velocity to become something even further beyond. It's like someone clockwork oranged every movie trope into the writer's eyes and told them to go create a game. So we walk through this fucking cavalcade of people dressed like shit and they don't bat an eye. They do talk about Rook though.
No. I mean, think about if we could turn them. Riding beside Rook, at the head of Devinter's vast armies.
Good thing I look like any other person here. It would be fucking crazy if these guys knew to look out for a big whatever. So we wade through the crowd. Me, a Kunari, a woman with a signature peg leg that is literally never addressed, and the one guy who would definitely blend in. Maybe he's doing all the work for us. The Dragon Age dragon shows up, we fight a bunch, and the whole way Elgranon is giving us the old mind whisper technique.
Your fight is futile. My Venatori are legion.
Whoa! Legion? What a banger line, dude! First of its kind, this game. So we run through the fog trap. Solus uses the thinning veil to talk to Big Elg. We make it to the imprisoned Dalish and free them. Thank fucking Christ that big-ass dragon that's within eyesight is busy dunking its tail in water because it would without a doubt kill everyone here if it were capable of moving. Like, why is the game structured this way? You know what would make Elgranon a much better villain? If he goes, "Oh, I know where you are," and sends his dragon to kill every prisoner here, maybe even a companion or someone close to us in some way. I mean, come on, give us some stakes, some reason to play this game beyond the gameplay. It's like, this game feels like it was designed for the person playing it to be scrolling their phone at the exact same time. It feels like the cutscenes were structured to be background noise while you do something else. As you can imagine, it's time to talk to Solus again after all of this. After seeing what you've been able to accomplish, he respects you now, which the game helpfully tells you in case the words "I was wrong about you, you're actually a great leader" weren't fucking obvious enough.
It took me centuries to build such a bond during my rebellion.
If the elves all had the personality of a finely polished brick, I'm sure it would have taken you a month to befriend them also. The best part to come out of all of this is once again when Solus talks about the previous game and the connections that he formed with the likes of the Inquisitor, Cole, Josephine, and Cassandra. I mean, nothing more comes of it, but it is nice to hear about that game. So the plan now is to, I don't know, go kill God, but this time for real.
We found the gods before.
Not without help, we didn't.
You didn't fucking get help last time. They told you where they were going. I guess if you count that as help. Maybe if we go back to where we last saw God. Wait, hold on. We just left an angry elven god on top of a gigantic fucking dragon in the woods where one of our greatest allies reside. What's he doing now? Brooding? Did he go, Ah, drat, I guess you guys win this time. I mean, the Veil Jumpers are they're right up the road. If he wanted sacrifices, he could just go there. I mean, whatever. Our plan is to meet with the Inquisitor and, I don't know, some Antivan crow or another. We meet with the Inquisitor first and he goes,
I once called him by another name.
Nev Gallus.
I don't know about you, but my hands hurt from clapping. This waste of time turns out to be a waste of time because the Inquisitor just called us over to gossip about our companions and that's the entire quest. Works for me, let's go see what the League of Ordinary Men are up to.
I can't believe you're defending them.
Jacobus.
My cousin died.
Jacobus.
No.
Well, now that unpleasantness is dealt with...
A chance to find your gods and to free them.
How do you know it's for real?
Their information is real.
And you didn't share this with me?
Rook of Iago.
Good luck, Rook.
So the informant who knows how to get to the gods is this fucking guy.
I promise. I'll signal when it's time to fight.
Strange way to ambush someone.
I don't have to ambush anyone.
Probably the best designed person in this entire game, this dude looks like an absolute menace. Like if I shut my brain off, this is fucking awesome. Look at this dude.
You live in a casino. Let us make a game of this. I will become what the gods want. Welcome their whispers. Meet me and show me if the crows deserve my city.
This is unironically the best thing this game has done because it at least tries to explain why the Antam leaders broke away from the Qun. Oh wait, no, they broke away well before the Elven gods popped out of the hyperbolic time chamber to corrupt them. Whoops. Well, at least the guy looks and sounds cool, which is the best thing that we can possibly hope for at this stage, just hype moments and aura.
My husband, Pierre, he was very strong, very angry.
What?
When I tried to leave him, he used that strength on me. A little poison in his supper, and my husband went to sleep and never awakened.
This game is a fucking fever dream. We go fight this guy, but he turns into a big demon thing, so that's no fun. The governor guy from the scene before turns out to be a traitor or something, I don't know.
I gave them an inch, so they would not take a mile.
Turns out that Treviso is running on the Imperial measurement system. I don't know what to do with that information, but I think that it means that foot-long subs are back on the menu. What the fuck am I talking about? I think I went fucking nuts at this point in the fucking script. But yeah, for some reason this guy that we've never seen, heard of, or witnessed in any capacity until this quest is, I don't know, a nuisance that we can take care of before going off to fight the gods. But I'm not gonna do that because holy shit, I've finally reached the end of this game. The relief that I felt when seeing that kind of felt like I made it through a natural disaster. Or like, a big shit. There's one last thing to get into before heading to the end, and that is that there's quite a lot of quests and objectives pertaining to Solas's memories, which you think would have been by far the most interesting part of the game given that it directly ties to a pivotal character from Inquisition. But it's about as botched as everything else, because again, the infrastructure is good, but the details and responses are not. Basically, Solas led his charge against the other gods who turned to the Blight for more power. He pleaded with his lover Mythal to convince the others to knock it off, and it wound up getting her killed, which isn't a terrible story. But here's what we get to listen to during the unfolding of said story.
So they were doing it.
That's more important than his rebellion. It's like kingdoms coming together when an archdemon rises.
Nah, they were doing it.
So Mythal goes off to investigate what Solas says. Then, what? It's too clean.
Seems plenty messy with them doing it.
What's the crime? What did we see here that he feels guilty about?
It's like a terrible mystery science theater. I'm a detective, where's the lead? I'm a warden, the Blight is bad. I'm a quirked up NB, they're totally boning. Like, what prompts me to continue listening to this story unfold? I just had no desire. It's not worth wading through a septic tank for a tiny flake of gold. So this whole final mission thing kicks off with a meeting with Morrigan, who continues to have hair right in front of her eyeball. My guy's like, well, the gods have to wait until an eclipse in order to forge a new Fade Dagger in order to rip open the veil, and that's not gonna happen for another month. Then they just make an eclipse happen with magic. It does look cool though. Visuals are killer as always. We head back to the lighthouse and get the opportunity to chat with our romantic partner of choice. In my case, it was Harding, purely because she lands smack in the middle of aesthetically pleasing and not as annoying. I mean, it helps that they really beautified her between this game and the last. In the last game, she looked more like a person. In this game, she looks more like a character. Plus, I mean, she's the only one that could give a mean dwarf job, and who am I to pass on that?
I can't stop thinking about the moon. They moved the moon, Rook.
The writers are really going down swinging on this one. Their entire goal seems to be to get me to regret my decision. And to top it off, no dwarf job, just dwarf poverty, I guess. So I go to Varric instead, but he's a figment of my imagination. He never existed, it was all a dream, and my guy is actually blackout drunk in Orlais. Can't say that I've ever played a game that had me hoping for a Final Fantasy X ending. So we invade the beach of Normandy, except since we had all of our allies cause problems all at once, the beach of the island where the world-ending ritual is happening is left unguarded, and we somehow slipped past an entire fleet of Antam because we're just one boat or some dumb shit. I know it's late in the game for this kind of talk, but I really can't help myself. Imagine if just for once the devs went full realism, or as close as you can get with this kind of ordeal. Throughout the game, you can upgrade your allies so that their strength reaches a certain star rating from 1 to 3. I have 1 3-star ally, 2 2s, and the rest are 1s, so not great stuff overall. Now imagine that because of that, we go to slip by the fleet and all hell breaks loose. They spot us right as we're approaching the shoreline and start firing on us relentlessly. Lucanus loses an arm, Nev's peg leg detaches, Tosh is blind in one eye from shrapnel. Balara manages to stop everybody's bleeding as best she can with healing salves as we hunker down in a nearby cave. The group decides to push on anyway. Nev tosses on a chunk of driftwood. Lucanus can manage with one arm since he's an expert assassin. Tosh ties on an eye patch and shakes it off. We're pushing against insurmountable odds just to get to these gods, and it's clear that not all of us are going to make it out of this alive. I'd like to think that even if I didn't have a firm attachment to these people, that a scene like that would at least move me a little bit. It'd make this group feel like genuine heroes, like the stakes are truly at their highest point. It's why Mass Effect 2's ending felt as dire as it was. What we instead get is an easy landing and a little chat on the shoreline. You can choose to send Davrin or Harding off to lead a splinter group, of which I chose the former because Davrin owes me a goddamn death. Alright, game time. We sprint from the bottom of this island to the top. There's still treasure along the way, so there's some kind of post-game, but who gives a shit? Actually, there's a reason for this treasure. It actually upgrades a lot of the stuff that you had already, which effectively makes grinding for it throughout the game near useless. I mean, when I came into this, I had grinded out like, 3 or 4 legendary items, top grade, and then the rest were purples, and by the end of it, everything was legendary. So, kind of made the effort on that worthless. I don't know, maybe I wouldn't have got as many if everything was just blues or something. I don't know. But yeah, all the treasure that I get here seems to be stuff that I just missed. So, I guess that's cool. My pathing looks like this at this stage just because I don't really care to follow the linear path. The Antam have hired human mercenaries which will do anything for gold as I Captain America slice them in half with my shield. A big guy with a big name and a big health bar shows up and he dies in 3 hits, so I crank the difficulty as high as it will go at this stage, which doesn't change too much. The entire way up, Rook continues to recap what's happening as it happens, making sure that the player knows that the gods are trying to end the world. If only we had a little tooltip popping up at the same time, just to hammer the point home. Speaking of, Elgranon broadcasts across the island telling everyone that he intends to transform the world and every being in it. The Antam seem to be on board despite being a faction and race of people who should not be okay with that, but we're long past that.
Archdemon!
And it's a big one.
The Archdemon doesn't see or hear us, so we're good. Unfortunately, we're once again born to shit and forced to wipe, as we have to take out every darkspawn in sight in order to progress throughout these areas. But the fortunate news is that we get gentle reminders about our goal throughout the way to soothe us from these horrors.
One team to draw off that army, and another to stop the gods from finishing their dagger. I'll take the rest of us and get to the gods before they finish their dagger and cut open the Fade. We kill her, take the gods' dagger. If the gods finish their dagger, open the Fade and unleash all the blight. We're getting closer to where the gods are making their dagger. Gods might be close, but they'd be gloating if they finish their dagger. If we kill Gillenane and steal that dagger, then Elganon can't unleash the blight. Lucanis, the dagger.
Bellara thankfully gets elf-napped after we have her solve the Rubik's Cube to get to the next part of the game. Davrin and Lucanis fuck off to do their own tasks, which sucks because I actually took the time to upgrade Lucanis' shit. But whatever, the dwarf with the skin-tight, ab-encrusted, fat-assed supersuit is good enough for me, I guess. This leads us to the fight with Big Gil, who traps everybody in 3 layers of indescribable goo instead of just killing them. As we free them one by one, her health depletes, and the ensuing cutscene, well, she actually fucking kills Davrin. Literally the best scene in the game. And the game makes sure that you know that by telling you in the sidebar that Davrin has committed honorable Subaru. And his fucking griffin follows him, so that thing's dead too, I guess. Well, that was a fucking waste. But good enough for me. Probably means that Harding would have gotten the business end of these tentacles had I chosen her to lead, so we dodged a bullet there. I'm owed a romance scene. This whole ordeal causes Rook to go through a crisis because he apparently never thought that somebody would die. Me too, buddy. I'm just as surprised. The big plot twist makes its debut and Varric is revealed to have been dead this entire time. I feel like if people had acknowledged him talking throughout the game, it would have been a lot less obvious, because then you could just flash back to those conversations and show what they actually said. Rook's trauma warping their words so that they acknowledge Varric. As things stand, the guy hardly ever talked, and when he did, no one said jack shit to him. As we fall into the pit of despair, Solas reveals that he was waiting for this moment, that he gained Rook's trust so that he could capitalize on this shattering of his psyche and use it to swap places with him when the time was right. Again, it's the best plot point in the game so far. It only took the entire game to get to it. It's exceedingly difficult to have gone through the Veilguard talking about it the way that I have and then get face down with a scene that genuinely does everything as right as it can. It feels like a very strange march through the shades of a game that could have been but wasn't. Rook plods through this elven prison confronting his own buried feelings, his regret for bringing Bellara with him and potentially getting her killed, even further regret for actually getting Davrin killed. And of course the most regret for Varric, who he had to try to fill the shoes of for the entire game. It's a genuinely good scene, one that results in Rook facing his buried emotions and finding his way out of the god's cage with some help from his friends. Like I said before, supposedly the focus from the writing team was directed towards the bonds that you've created with your companions, and this scene encapsulates those efforts at the very least. But I would argue that there was a bigger focus that might have been inadvertently weaved into nearly every facet of this game. Rook is the hero. The biggest, boldest, most important hero that we've ever seen. I may disagree with the concept, but it is what the writers focused on first and foremost, even if they didn't mean to. And with that in mind, I would argue that this entire ending sequence could have been more effective if they had further exaggerated just how powerful Rook has become. If his realization of Varric's death led to blind rage so powerful that he ascends into being able to compete with the gods. The visuals in this game are amazing, as I've noted frequently. Can you imagine if they had leaned full on into that anime aesthetic and given Rook a God of War wrathful kind of buff here? I mean, sure, it might not make sense on paper, but that's never stopped them from writing some of the goofiest aura-fueled nonsense to supplement the big scenes. So I mean, lean into it, stick to your strengths, and give Rook his Super Saiyan moments that will allow him to return to reality and lead his team to glory. Either way, we make it back to the lighthouse with Bellara missing and Davrin dead. You get to have your final chats at last, with your companions conveniently mentioning that Varric has been fucking dead for a while now, only further pointing towards how silly it was that no one noticed Rook's lack of awareness throughout this entire journey. They all kind of mention how you helped them to sort out their own issues, which is nice I guess, but not particularly fulfilling. If anything, mentioning stuff like Minrath's suffering and all that really only continues to exacerbate this game's shortcomings, but I'm too tired to continue clawing at it. Of course, you can finally go have a romance scene if you want, which I guess instead of trying to improve anatomy and all that, the devs just bailed and decided to fade to black after all of these years. So that sucked. Though it was kind of funny watching my 6-foot guy with his ham-sized head loom over this tiny dwarf girl like she isn't the size of a human child. I will say that I went and looked up all of the romance scenes after this because I was curious, and they all go precisely like this besides Tasha's, who gets completely naked and picks your guy up. Like I said, there was something blatantly and unabashedly sexual going on with the way that they were written and interact with you. Alright, so the finale of this thing has us attempting to stop both Elgar'nan and Solas from destroying the world in their respective ways. As of right now, the two seem to be fighting it out, which you would think would mean that we should wait until the last moment until one vanquishes the other. But nah, we're just plowing right into this thing, which actually leads to a spectacular chain of scenes. The funny part about all of this is listening to these guys go, "Man, Minrathous is such a powerful city with powerful defenses, it's gonna be tough." Yeah, until it falls in an afternoon to one dragon. Either way, you choose who goes with what group while retaining your usual 2 party members. In my case, 1 group is strong and 2 are weak. So I sent Nev with the strong group because she seemed like the right person to disarm barriers, and then I sent Tosh and Emmerich with the weak groups. The scenes that play out are the heavily stylized non-stop action that you would hope to see, and I had 0 complaints until the very end. Because I stuck Emmerich on one of the most dangerous tasks thinking that he's fucking immortal, but he's not. He's just, I guess, immortal to old age, which does feel a little silly. It's probably my fault for not finding some kind of dialogue option where he goes, "By the way, I can still die." But the implication up until now was that he's good to live through something like this. Like, I would think that his soul could just be revived in the necropolis or something. I don't know why I'm overthinking this, I just expected Tosh to die and him to live. So yeah, I actually reloaded this more out of curiosity than concern for Emmerich. And while Tosh does get buried the same way that Emmerich does, they managed to pop out and keep fighting since they were better suited for scaling a big-ass colossus. And honestly, that's a pretty cool set of requirements and consequences. So yeah, we get to do some fighting, and the next scene that pops up has Harding dying because she's not suited to fight mages, I guess. I don't care to reload here, but I bet if I would have stuck Lucanus in, he would have been fine. If Harding can't take a single concussive blow, then it's a wonder that she survived the night before this. So we confront Solas first, who's surprised to see us in the flesh, escaped from super jail. He's like, "Well, I was wrong to manipulate you into seeing Varric this entire time. Just letting you know that I feel really bad about that. Anyways, you want to team up? I can't kill this guy alone."
If we are to save this world, we must work together.
This is hands down the best goddamn speech option in this entire game. It embodies something that I've said throughout this entire playthrough numerous times at every turn. But yeah, Solas pledges to never touch the Veil again and abandon his plan to unleash the Darkspawn and overrun the world if you team up with him to kill Big Elg. We press in further and discover the hive mind intelligence nest that Elgar'nan has created to control the Blight. It's stupid, but really fucking cool because Bellara actually seems to be at the heart of it, all fucked up and blighted. That is a cool-ass visual. I ever talk about how good these guys did in that regard? Anyways, Solas transforms into the Dragon Age Dreadwolf and hops onto the Archdemon before he can get renamed to the Veilguard. That leaves us to fight the Flood, which is as unimpressive as everything else. We save Bellara, she goes, "Wait, you can't kill Elgar'nan because..." And then the Archdemon swoops in, causes carnage. Morrigan is relegated from very powerful person to person who can stop building from crushing us. We make it to a safe spot and go, "Hey, take this elven broad to the healer," before hearing what she has to say about Elgar'nan because... It's a secret. It's a big twist incoming. It's a big secret. This fucking script is so fucked. Now you can go talk to her right now in this sort of Mass Effect 3 last chat before the fight sequence.
Rook, stand firm and watch Liz Harding's back.
Nah, she's dead. The big secret here is that Elgar'nan is directly tied to the Veil. Basically, his life is keeping it in place, and if he dies, the Fade will spill out and kill everyone anyway. Awfully convenient. So it turns out that the god of lying was being deceitful again and knew that if we killed this guy, his plan would come to fruition anyway. On one hand, I would have liked to have seen this game play out differently and have you more able to directly shake Solas's resolve. On the other hand, I actually kind of love that even to the end, Solas reprises his role as a bastard who thinks that he knows what's best for the world. He presents this very charismatic front, someone who seems genuinely remorseful for his actions, but then at every turn he's actually manipulating and pulling people along for the ride so that he can get what he truly wants. This game could have been absolutely stellar. The end sequence comes at last with cinematic clashing of Solas in his Dreadwolf form and Elgernon's archdemon. Bellara learns to harness the blight in her veins to control bits and pieces of it. Elgernon fights you in 3 phases, now blighted and daunting. During the fight, Bellara seizes control of the blight as best she can to help Solas deal the death blow to the archdemon, rendering Elgernon vulnerable. We kill him, and now comes the final big decision. You see, this is gonna sound fucking stupid, but a couple hours ago it was revealed that the Veilguard decided to forge a fake dagger for some reason. I guess for this exact prophetic moment. Now mind you, no one knew what was going to happen when we killed Elgernon, if we'd gain access to the real dagger from Solas, if this fake dagger would ever be in a position to come into play. And for as reactive as the Veilguard has been throughout the game, they finally decided to be proactive, and this dagger was the result. I guess it's okay. Like, again, it sounds stupid, but it's not the worst plot point and could have been a lot dumber if it was just pulled out of Rook's ass at the end. I don't know, it's pretty dumb, but it's not like super dumb. Our standards have been lowered, like our bar has dropped to the fucking ground. Seeing it rise an inch up off the ground is like, woo! You know? Like, I don't know what else to tell you. This could be the plot point of the year. So Solas goes to commit his final betrayal, and we get to choose to give him the fake or the real dagger. Obviously, you have to go with the fake one, right? And the end result is about as close to stellar as you could hope for, with the magic required to rip open the Fade reflecting back onto Solas and temporarily stunning him. In his final moments, Solas reveals to be somebody who's prideful enough to think of himself as better than others, but ultimately as somebody who is humble to the end, disappearing with one final compliment to Rook. The final scene is more or less a one-to-one recreation of Jade Empire's ending, which was really funny to me. Like, look at this. It's even funnier when you realize that you don't recognize a single person here who's cheering for you, but yeah, that's the end. There's no elaboration on where people went, on what they did, or how things progressed after these events. Just a nice little stylized summary of who they are and what they immediately had to contend with based off of what you did in the game. It's an ending that adequately summarizes how BioWare as a whole seems to feel about this game and series now. It's done for the foreseeable future, and there's no interest in seeing anything more from it. The whole thing left me with a feeling of emptiness. If there was a term to describe how somebody feels empty at the end of a really good game, then the term that I would use now would be the exact opposite of that sort of emptiness. An emptiness at what could have been, what didn't happen, and how a series I loved wound up. Apparently that's called post-game depression, so post-game depression, I guess, real-life depression, I don't know. But hang on, before we launch into a sorrow-fueled mourning for this franchise, we gotta know what's happening with that other ending, right? Wow, this is the most YouTuber I've fucking ever been with these goddamn edits and setups, huh? Well, hang on now. Let's rewind. I don't know. I might even fucking do that anymore. I think I just talked myself out of my own edit. Well, shit. So this time we go to stab him with the real dagger and the same sort of thing happens. Now I wanted to see a bad guy ending, or maybe even something that exceeds expectations and shows that Solas really was trying to create a better world with minimal casualties or whatever. What happens instead is that my companions roll out and start attacking, giving my guy enough time to stab Solas and banish him to the Fade. So it's quite literally the same ending, which, I mean, come on, just do one ending, guys. It's the most BioWare way to end this series I think I've ever seen, but it somehow still blew me away with its ineptitude. There's no point to it, no optional bonus fight, no bad ending. Actually, I did look this up and there is a bad ending if you get as many allies killed as possible, and it winds up with Rook sacrificing himself to get sealed away with Solas. So at least there's that, but you have to actually hate this game to try to fuck up that badly. Like, this is an intentional thing, and it still winds up being effectively the same result. I just don't get it. You took the time to insert this false dagger plot right at the end like an afterthought, like it was a requirement. You threw in 3 or so endings and they all have the same results, like it was a requirement. Huh. Maybe there really was a checklist that the writers were told to push into the game, because I can't explain this shit otherwise. The only thing the not worst ending does is truly drudge over Solas' character, as this time he goes all out and screams about being a god, something that he went out of his way to refute before this. I don't know. At least there's a 4th mystery ending where your female elvish inquisitor from the previous game decides to take Solas to hell with her, and I guess that's the best ending or something. If you don't care about the previous game's Inquisitor, and why would you at this point? I mean, you might have before when you were playing Inquisition, but now you don't give a fuck about them, and you see them disappear into the fucking sunset with Solas. I guess that's a great ending. I don't know. You know, they're just sitting in this fucking desaturated, terrible place with nothing. It's like, but they lived happily ever after. They had true love. Yeah, no, they'd fucking go crazy. But no, right now it looks like a little Disney, like, ho, 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 you know, fucking off into the sunset. I don't know what that sound was, but you know. I'm just honestly surprised that this one made it in, since it confirms that Solas only has a preference for female elves, something that clashes with the preferences of this game's companions, but whatever. That doesn't really matter. The Veilguard is a game where you can see the passion in the visuals, the scenes, the voice acting, the music, the combat, the sound effects, the exploration, and yet despite all of that, it falls completely flat when stacked against the lovingly written, expertly crafted storytelling of the previous entries. It's a game that stands on its own in so many categories and yet crumbles as a video game belonging to the franchise that it's in. If you go back to the very start of this video when I outlined how the creative process went, you start to be able to read between the lines as to what happened with this game. I initially wanted to go into this solely blaming the writers. I had a firm belief that no matter your constraints, good writing can be applied to any type of game to make it flourish as something special. But this was the first game where I played through it and something felt wrong. Like, no matter what the writers did, they were forced to include this thing and that bit until they just didn't give a shit anymore. Looking at how the scope of this game changed, how it started as a completely different heist-focused project and then changed into something more multiplayer-centric with FIFA-style loot boxes and then just was forced into this Jedi Fallen Order style of game, I can't blame people for leaving. And I'll bet the ones who tried to remain weren't as happy as they were when the group was doing their damnedest to stay on the same page and spin this work of fiction into the silken gold that it's always had the capability to be. And maybe that led to those louder voices being laid off until this game was nothing but a shell to insert the latest EA action game formula into. Why try to salvage its plot and work to make it interesting if your boss is telling you that you need to put in X, Y, and Z first and foremost? I mean, this is all reckless speculation, I know that. It's easy to jump to conclusions and blame the big bad guys at the top whenever possible without actual evidence of them ruining the game. But I honestly feel like the entirety of the Veilguard tells you exactly what happened to this series without saying it directly. The art book that came out only continues to hammer this home and points towards initial ideas of having a team that doesn't like each other initially, of betrayals that occur throughout the game, of Solus taking a much more directly sinister approach, of terrible Tevinter practices being front and center. And somehow none of those interesting pieces made it into the game. I mean, what's that tell you when you see these people portraying active slavery in Tevinter, which has always been a thing, it's been a thing that's been mentioned since the very first game, and yet somehow none of that was really touched on. At least not in the main stuff and any of the companion stuff, which is the stuff I played. I guess it could have been in side quests. Still, to me that says somebody came in and said, hey, no, we're not doing the slavery thing. Don't put it into anything. And it's like, well shit, dude, what am I supposed to do with that? We're in like the worst goddamn place ever. The best things that this game does in addition to its visuals are all a matter of convenience, and I honest to God applaud that aspect of it. Fast travel nearly anytime and anywhere, open things whenever you want to without needing certain allies or equipment, reset your build on the fly, start companion quests without needing to have the companion in the party. It's all built around letting the player have fun and get to that fun as quickly and efficiently as possible, the one saving grace to this game when paired with the pretty stellar combat system. I mean, if you look at my endgame gear and see that I collected and upgraded nearly every chunk of gear that I wound up liking for my build, it means that I took the time to go find all of that gear. Grinded for reputation, hunted for treasure, sifted through these maps, and I wouldn't have done all of that if I wasn't having fun playing the game. But I can get that same kind of enjoyment out of something like Dark Souls or Borderlands or God of War or a myriad of other action-first games with fun loot systems and map exploration. I have to circle back to this idea that I had earlier on in the video. There is a high chance that there are a decent number of people who genuinely enjoy this game's writing. They don't mind the departure from the more serious tones in previous entries or the squashing of the morally gray writing throughout the game. They enjoy the quips, the humor, the lightheartedness of it all. And I know that it's probably too late to say this now given how I've gone through this game, but that is completely fine. I'm genuinely glad that there are people who love this game and its characters, its moments, its story, and writing. If that's the direction this series continues in, then those people can continue to have fun with Dragon Age. It just won't be something that's for me anymore. I'm not going to redact any of my criticisms or obscenities because that's just how I feel as somebody who played this series for what it used to be. But I would also never criticize somebody else for personally feeling different, and I do want to make that clear. It's okay for people to enjoy things that I don't. Now, all of that said, to me this game is a bottom-of-the-barrel smoldering pile of millennial quirk, feel-good modern action movie moments, and horrendously paced ideas that are shoved down your throat at sporadic intervals, a parroting of popular choices that feel as soulless and unlovable as an AI writing poetry. It's the Marvelification of a franchise that I loved, of one that was renowned for its amazing dialogue, fantastic player choice, and consequences that truly felt like they mattered. Good writing has bad things happening that people have to overcome. It has believable, human people with flaws and issues that make them feel alive. Being afraid to make the player feel bad only leads to apathy. I would make a Kreia joke, but even that morally gray stint of genius came out of Obsidian instead of BioWare. I know that people have been saying old BioWare is dead and gone for a very long time, but I never truly felt that until this game. Yes, even when I was playing Andromeda, I at least felt like there was some kind of spark still there. It was just very muddled. And maybe that's just hopeless optimism on my end. Maybe I would have felt the same way had Andromeda piggybacked straight off of Shepard's story. But the Veilguard was the final nail in the coffin for me with all of my wishy-washiness and blinders to the truth. Actually, you could probably justify a lot of the ways that I felt just based off of when people left the company, but whatever, it's not worth it. I was going to end the video here, but as it happens, a news article broke about the internal process that went down leading up to the Veilguard. It's a Bloomberg article, so I had to pay for it because somehow EA being involved makes everything a microtransaction. But it actually confirms much of my speculation, and I want to share key parts of it with you. Yes, Dragon Age pivoted multiple times, including to and from a live service game. The missing information there involves a writing team who was directed to make a fun, lighthearted, campy game in order to suit the tone of live service. This remained the same even when the course was eventually shifted back to a single-player story. Meanwhile, the developers were given minimal resources and told to get the game out as soon as possible. What this meant was that they were aiming to release in 1.5 years after 2020. But EA kept delaying the deadline and giving them more time, and by the time they got that extra wiggle room, their story decisions couldn't be revamped at the drop of a hat. Furthermore, a large chunk of the Mass Effect team was brought in to help finish the game, and this one was really funny to me because that team describes the Dragon Age team as a pirate ship with a lack of focus that eventually gets the job done. Meanwhile, the Mass Effect team is described as rigid, top-down, and laser-focused. So when the Mass Effect team came in to help, the leadership looked at the Veilguard, scoffed, and began making sweeping decisions. And the EA execs gave him any budget increases that were needed to get things done, which was something that the Dragon Age team had to fight tooth and nail for when it came to cobbling together their projects. It bred some pretty understandable contempt between the sibling studios, though it also led to some of the best moments in the Veilguard. So maybe the Mass Effect team was right. Their leaders complained directly about the snappy and snarky moments of the Veilguard, claiming that that trend is dead now, which they are 100% right about. Seeing as this tone was initially pitched for Dragon Age during the heyday of quirky dialogue and media, and then fell out of favor by 2024, the Mass Effect team was correct in their assessment. However, their full takeover of the game led to the inconsistencies in tone that I lamented throughout this video, and that makes declaring their interference as a good thing that much harder to do. So there you have it. This game was never going to succeed with the way that it was managed. And after a decade of failures from BioWare, it's difficult to see the developers succeed from here on out too. Thanks for watching. This one took as long as it did because I had to force myself to play the game most of the time. Hopefully I'll be moving on to something better from here. Until then though, I have a Twitch where I've been starting to stream again on Tuesdays and Fridays. I have a Twitter where I tweet out new videos. I have a Discord where people hang out in the meantime. And I have a Patreon. And that's it. Have a good one.
Nev Gallus.